When someone enters another world, they get the most powerful skills and play an active role. Usually everything goes as standard. This story started with a little boy who could use earth magic. The character used earth magic on a tile, which immediately regenerated. All the people around were delighted, and one of the men said it would make it easier for him to trade and shook the boy's hand. This boy was not someone who could defeat the strongest enemies with a single blow, nor was he even a chosen hero. But there were people he pleased, and he seemed to think that was a very good thing. The boy looked at the man and suggested that they go home. At that time, the mustachioed man remained as calm as possible, but he couldn't believe that this road was built by a 6-year-old child. The hero was just a good-natured man. And this story will go about a kid who used his memories from his past life. The main character's name was Michio Tsuchida, and he was 35 years old. As usual, he was coming home from work on his day off. After another part-time job, the protagonist was on his way home when he suddenly heard a woman's scream. Michio didn't understand anything about what was happening at that moment or what the police were doing. A chill ran through him. Bad things had happened to him before when he got chills, and this was quite bad timing. The protagonist realized that he needed to get out of here as soon as possible. But there was a kid in there and this guy was going crazy. Meanwhile, the killer was yelling that they had 1 minute left. Michio wasn't going to stand for it, and in desperation, he pounced on the killer, freeing the girl from his grasp. As the protagonist fell to the ground with the girl, the assassin said that it was time and now he would be free. Before Michio knew it, he saw a knife in front of his eyes and had no time to say anything. The crazed man plunged the weapon straight into the boy's back. The protagonist started to lose consciousness, and the distraught man ordered him to stay out of the way. At this point, the police grabbed him and ordered him to stay calm and quiet. But the killer was not going to surrender and ordered him to let him go, appealing to Marigas herself. Michio was getting worse, and he heard the girl's mother thanking him for saving her daughter. The guy closed his eyes and heard a voice different from this girl's and didn't realize what it was. He heard that voice again thanking him. For some reason it called him kind and asked him to wake up. The woman's voice asked him to stay with her and hold on. The guy finally opened his eyes and saw an unfamiliar beautiful woman in front of him. The man with a mustache exclaimed that Mr. Kane was awake and asked him to contact his master quickly. The hero did not realize where he was, for there were many people of furniture and clothes that he saw for the first time. He had a terrible headache, and at the same time a lot of information was going into his head. He managed to remember that he was Kane Rose, the 4th son of Viscount Hay Rose. 2 weeks had passed since then, and apparently Michio had reincarnated in another world. In his mind were the memories of the boy Kine up to his age of 5. The first lady of the Hay Rose house, Lydia, asked Kine if he was okay. This person was not Kane's real mother, but she replaced his mother Lenore, who died of illness. She always took great care of Kine. She reminded him that the boy had fallen down the stairs and almost died. The hero spread his hands and said he was alright, but the woman touched his forehead and said he didn't look so bad. Kane smiled and admitted that he was starving, and the girl already knew it, so she brought him some porridge and the hero thought it looked very appetizing. The girl took the spoon and pointed it towards the guy, saying that an airplane was flying towards him. The hero felt embarrassed and told Lydia that he could eat himself. But the girl insisted because he wasn't fully recovered, so she asked him not to persist. Kane had to agree, and the blushing boy opened his mouth. Lydia stroked the boy's head and said he did a good job. But she noticed that he had become kind of aloof since he woke up, because he was more spoiled before. Kane didn't know about this, and decided that he should pretend and act like a child. With these thoughts in mind, he pounced on the woman and called her mom. The blushing hero straddled her waist and pressed himself against her huge breasts, and the girl called him a spoiled brat. On the threshold of the room showed up Alice Sen Rose, which was the eldest daughter of the Sen Rose family. She called Lydia Mama and asked permission to enter. The girl had asked Alice to open the door only when she was answered, and she had told the girl this many times. But today she decided to make an exception and allowed Alice to enter. The girl immediately pounced on Kane, worrying about his well-being, and said he needed to sleep. Lydia smiled and said that the girl was rather embarrassed, but Alice didn't understand why she was saying that. Lydia mentioned how Alice had been worried about Kane for a long time, and the girl blushed. Nevertheless, Alice decided to make sure that Kane was feeling better and decided to check if he had a fever. The girl touched her forehead and was surprised that it wasn't too hot. Kane smiled as he felt Alice's nice and cool hands on him. Kane had 3 brothers and an older sister, and they all looked very beautiful. A father named Luc Sen Ruse, Viscount Sen Ruse, came into the room and said that if Alice kept this up, Kane would not be able to settle down. The father noticed that his son looked much better. He thought that the lad could be baptized next week, but Cain didn't understand him. Cain's homeland was small for a nobleman, and it's a walled city of about 5,000 people. This is about half the size of a barony with an average population of over 10,000. In this world, a child is baptized at the age of 5, and God has always given them one skill. The skill could fall to absolutely anyone, and the God tested each child's abilities. Therefore, a person's future depended on which skill would fall out, and the hero was worried that his life would be decided at the age of 5. Here things were different from his previous life, but Michio's life did not turn out well. Cain came into this world completely by accident and had no idea what would happen to him in the future. It was a bit exciting for him, but the guy's eyes lit up and he decided that this place was pretty cool and he could enjoy his new life. Since he reincarnated from another world, he would have an infinite number of items, strong magic and alchemy with all the attributes that would allow him to become a warrior. Cain began to look forward to this and wondered what he would get. The hero, along with his family, entered a beautiful temple that surprised the lad quite a bit. The man asked Lady Lydia and Alice to wait here. Lydia hoped that Cain would get a good skill and Alice wished the guy good luck. As soon as Cain entered the room, he met Bishop Sistine, who greeted my lord, Lord Cain. The bishop would like to begin the baptismal rite and asked to take Cain's hand. Also, the guy needed to close his eyes when the bishop would pray. The main character did as he was asked and heard the voice he heard then. The female voice said that he had finally arrived. Cain opened his eyes and was surprised to see an endless bright space in front of him and an angel with wings. He did not realize where he was, and the angel said it was the world of the gods. The angel introduced herself as the goddess Guardia, and she called him here to thank him. Cain was surprised that it was one of the gods of this world, the Earth Goddess. The angel called the guy Pretty Bright, and Cain was surprised that she could read his mind. The goddess asked the lad if he remembered his last moments on Earth. The hero vaguely remembered dying protecting a little girl. The angel took the guy's hand and thanked him for what he did then, because the little girl he saved was connected to her, and if Cain hadn't protected her, the angel would have been in trouble. The goddess smiled and thanked the guy sincerely, and Cain noticed that the goddess had very soft hands. Cain spread his hands and said it was okay, for he was glad she was safe now. But if they were somehow related, the hero didn't understand why the goddess couldn't help her. The goddess certainly didn't argue that she had the ability to do so, but if she had done anything about it, it would have caused the earth and this world to become distorted. So she thanked Cain for protecting her life. The guy was very happy to know that his life had made a difference in the world. He just wanted to know that his life was worth living. In that case, the angel offered to take care of business and revealed the status of Cain. The boy came to be delighted, for he saw the status screen he had dreamed of for so long. But the goddess was no less surprised, noticing that he already had skills. Surely the hero didn't remember how something had changed when his mother Lenore died, and come to think of it, the hand he was holding glowed. That was how he inherited the skill of recovery magic from his mother. The hero remembered this moment, and the angel said that in that case, in thanks for saving him, she would like to give him 3 skills. A huge tape measure appeared in front of them, and the girl suggested that the guy press its lever. Cain was shocked, not realizing what it was, and assumed it was some kind of gambling. He understood how it was all happening and did not understand why one could not choose for oneself. But some converts chose skills that could upset the balance of the world, so they randomized them. Instead, the gods increased their numbers and the angel hoped she hadn't upset him too much. Cain went to the roulette wheel and thought it wasn't easy being a goddess and asked the roulette wheel for the best skills. After that, he pressed the button and earth magic, infinite magic, and magic circle magic popped up for him. Cain didn't quite understand what it was and the angel's face changed. Cain had not encountered earth magic before and he wondered if it was strong. There was an infinite amount of magic and the guy wondered if he could handle it if he showed ingenuity. Angel opened her mouth and grinned, saying that Cain's luck was not very high. Angel was madly worried about Cain, so she decided to give him her blessing as an earth goddess and compensate him with earth magic. She touched the boy's forehead and gave him a small blessing of Guardia. Now that she had given him her blessing, he could go to the church and pray for her. The girl said it would be rather infrequent, but she would watch him. She hoped that Cain would give him news from time to time and wished him all the best for the future. The hero had no time to reply to her before he saw the patriarch in front of him, who saw 3 skills in Cain's status. Cain's father was shocked when he heard that his son had the blessing of Guardia. Even though the main character's skills were a bit scarce, but he had a chance that his stats would be on the high side. Cain decided to look at it and opened his status. At the moment, he had a level 1 and was without a title. Cain was listed as a person reincarnated from Earth and had certain skills. First level Earth magic, first level magic formation magic, amount of magic infinite, magic of the magic circle and the small blessing of the goddess of Guardia. He could also see his magic power, physical strength, health, stamina, agility, stealth, intelligence and luck. Cain opened his mouth in horror when he saw his weak characteristics with physical strength under 5 units. The boy clutched his head, unable to imagine what would happen to his new life now. Now that the protagonist thought about it, he and Earth magic were made for each other. Cain thought more and more about his skills and used clay creation. With his power, the boy created a bill that his parents had never seen in their lives. They were amazed at such an invention. They told Cain that it was simply amazing and his father thought he could use it in farming. A dark-haired man came into their room and told the gentleman that it was just amazing because Mr. Cain had magically created a field and it was producing a huge harvest. Of course, it wasn't very large scale, so it was quite in keeping with his nature. Cain was a person who had reincarnated in another world and received 3 skills. Everything was fine up to that point, but the reaction of the goddess who gave him these skills was a bit alarming. He couldn't believe that it could have been that bad. He had been given very simple skills, but the path ahead was a difficult one. His father noticed that something was wrong with the boy and suggested that they go home. The father and the boy left the bishop's office and the girl wondered what abilities and skills Cain had gotten. The girl was also curious to know how many skills the hero had. His father replied that Cain had 2 magics, Earth magic and magic of the magic circle. He had also inherited recovery magic from the Lenner. The boy looked questioningly at his father and assumed that his infinite magic was hidden and his father couldn't see it. The girl threw herself into the boy's arms and praised him for having as many as 3 skills. The guy was shocked by Alice, but the girl knew that the hero also got his skills from his mom. Cain didn't quite know what she meant. He assumed that Alice had that kind of magic too. The girl knew what Earth magic was, but she hadn't heard of magic of the magic circle, and neither had the boy's father. The father decided to write a letter to Benjamin and ask him to look for any information. But apparently, they had no idea that the boy would get Earth magic. The girl put her hand on her father's shoulder and said that it was useless to worry about it now. One could always go back to the mansion and see what was there. Her father agreed with her and told Cain that the status board was not allowed to be viewed even by family members and he had to remember that. To even try to look at them was bad manners. The boy agreed with his father and this meant that the secret was kept even from trusted family members. Usually everyone showed their status to friends and colleagues by cooperating with them and Cain would show his status to his comrade. But apparently this world had its own rules. The guy decided to think for himself when he had new friends and could decide how to use this skill. That's when it would be fun again. Cain wanted his new life to finally start and when he returned to the mansion he needed to test the skill as soon as possible. A hero could take apart a first level skill into the magic circle and record it on scrolls, magic stones and so on. A separate skill was required to analyze magic into a magic circle. To write disassembled magic into a scroll or magic stone required 10 times the amount of magic consumed by the disassembled magic. To use a written spell required 3 times the amount of magic power consumed by the analyzed spell. The amount of use of written magic could be increased by the amount of magic power consumed while writing the spell, and the number of times the magic was used. While the hero was writing all this down, he thought that there were too many letters written here for him. He didn't understand where to get the analysis skill he needed, plus he couldn't do anything with it at first level. This skill wouldn't be useful to him for a while. Cain learned Earth magic and the prerequisite for it was manipulation magic. When using Earth magic, using the surrounding soil or sand consumed 10% of magic power. In some ways it was very formulaic magic and Cain clearly didn't get what he wanted. He wondered if he could make a golem or something like that if he raised his level enough. At first level, regenerative magic could use healing and poison elimination, a skill he got from Mother Lenore, so he should be sure to use it carefully. As for the infinite amount of magic power, it included passive abilities. The hero could always receive magic power from outside, and unless he acquired a manipulation skill, it would endlessly absorb and overflow magic power. It looked pretty amazing, and Cain wondered what kind of skill it was. The guy didn't realize what kind of skill it was that he couldn't be happy about and decided to study what was written next. Earlier, Goddess Guardia had mentioned that Cain hadn't learned the magic manipulation skill yet. She disabled the infinite amount of magic skill until he learned how to manipulate magic well. Lastly, the goddess advised him to learn the magic manipulation skill quickly, and the guy grabbed his head. He didn't understand what it was. Previously, he thought that the Goddess Guardia had some kind of power, and now he only needed the goddess blessing. The guy studied the blessing and decided that it was pretty good. It gave plus 20% to the increase in earth magic and recovery magic. The consumption of earth magic and recovery magic was also reduced to 10%. He was also additionally aware of the comprehension of foreign languages. The hero wondered what the comprehension of foreign tongues was and assumed that he could read a text unknown to him. When Cain was able to do so, he thanked the goddess for the compliment. Cain was still excited at the thought of being able to use magic, and he wondered what he would do with that magic next. Someone knocked on the hero's room and the doors opened. A butler named Randolph apologized to the boy. Alice was next to the butler and asked if Cain was there. Randolph told the lad that his master wanted to see him in the parlor, and the boy replied that he would be right there. Cain wanted to know more, and he wondered what his father wanted. Alice got angry at the boy for not listening to her at all and asked him not to ignore her. Cain felt embarrassed and apologized to the girl. Alice smiled and assumed he was busy with his skills anyway, and it dawned on her that Cain had locked himself in his room as soon as they arrived at the villa. While Alice was pulling the boy's cheeks, the butler said that Ms. Alice had also done something similar on skill day. Alice jumped up on the spot and a blush appeared on her cheeks. The girl didn't understand why he was saying that and made the excuse that she just wanted to finish the book. She was late for dinner because she was engrossed in the book, and the hero realized that Alice was also preoccupied with her skills. The butler bowed and apologized for apparently misunderstanding Alice, and Cain noticed that she was quite mature. Basically, Alice was going to say that they got their skills from Lenore's mom and should keep them safe. Cain smiled and the girl didn't understand what he was laughing at. The guy thought about her being a little kid though. Cain walked into his parents' room where the atmosphere was quite tense, and he didn't understand what it all meant. His father put a cup of tea on the table and wanted to talk regarding the skills he had been given today. He immediately said that it was difficult and asked Cain not to get depressed. The boy completely misunderstood him and Lydia looked angrily at Cain's father. The man apologized and said he had misspoken. The boy didn't understand what reason he had to be depressed, as Cain already knew in aristocratic society, including theirs, the skills they received at baptism determined almost all of his future. Those who possessed martial skills entered the knightly academy and joined the knightly orders of their kingdom or clan. Those who possessed combat magic entered the mage academy and became royal mages. People who had political skills usually entered the royal academy and became civil servants of their kingdom or clan. But father had just checked and concluded that the hero's land magic had no attack skills even if his level increased, and the details of magic circle magic were unknown to them. Father didn't know how to put it in other words and didn't want to say it. Or rather, father couldn't assume that he could have a decent future, and Lydia's tears flowed. Cain couldn't believe that his parents really thought his future was so bleak. The hero thought that his magic was certainly complicated and the skills just needed to be worked on. He didn't think it was worth being sad about it. Lydia tearfully hugged the boy and asked him not to worry, because they weren't going to give up on him. His father, Lydia, and even the maids hung their heads, and the lad realized that they were worrying about him too much. It wasn't like this in his previous life, and he didn't want to upset these people. The boy gathered his hand into a fist and asked his father for one favor. Apparently, he needed the skill of manipulating magic to use earth magic, so he would like to learn the skill of manipulation. And if his father knew how to learn it, he should have told him. Either the hero would want permission to go to the library in order to study it himself. He asked for no doubts that he would be fine, and even earth magic could do a lot if he mastered it competently. And if it didn't work, he could use earth magic to cultivate a field. And if he mastered the magic, the restoration magic his mother had given him, he could heal people in his domain. So he had no doubt that everything would be fine. For this reason, the hero didn't want them to worry much about him, and his parents stared at the guy in surprise. His father stood to his feet and agreed with him, deciding that maybe earth magic had potential too, and they, as parents, shouldn't have given up. Lydia hugged Cain and suggested that they work together. Her father agreed that he would write a letter to Benjamin and tell him to come visit them this vacation. Father thought that Benjamin knew how to get the skill of manipulating magic and would ask him to help with it. The hero knew he said it with great enthusiasm, but fighting wasn't the only thing to do in the other world. These people were too nice for him, and he had to do his best to keep them from being sad. Cain was only 5 years old, and by the standards of this world he had 50 more years ahead of him, so he could have some fun. By the way, Cain thought that the brother Benjamin his father was talking about was now studying at the Mage Academy, and Cain had yet to learn that using magic was not that easy. Earth magic was very hard. During the test, the teacher told the student that he had to become a master of magic and focus. After all, without that, he wouldn't be able to kill any goblins, and the guy thought it was all from the results on the magic test. Once his test was over, it was the next student's turn. The guy turned the statue into ice, which disintegrated into small pieces, and the other students thought he was joking. They dubbed him the most brilliant man since the beginning of the Magician Academy. The teacher told Benjamin Senrose that he was as talented as ever. 6 months had already passed since the day the protagonist decided to work hard on his skills. The boy was asked to stop and take his time, but Cain was not going to sit still. After all, today was the day he had been waiting for, and brother Benjamin was finally coming back. Earlier, his father had asked to listen to him carefully and said that if Cain didn't learn magic manipulation, he was forbidden to use magic. And if he used magic without learning it, he could lose his skills. The hero thought that only Benjamin would be able to help him with this. Cain didn't realize he would be back so soon, and the maid opened the doors. Cain and Alice finally met the second son in the Senrose family, Benjamin. Cain was happy to see him and greeted his brother. Benjamin smiled and said hello to the children, noticing how the girl and boy had grown up. The butler welcomed young Mr. Benjamin home, and the boy told Ralph that he was home. Benjamin also noticed that the butler Randolph called him by his still young name, but that was what it was customary to call everyone until they were of age. Randolph bowed and told the boy that Master Luke and Miss Lydia were waiting for him in the parlor. The butler also nudged the children and told Alice and Cain that they should go there as well. Apparently, Brother Ben was a very bright boy, and he became a resident at the age of 14. He was the first in the history of the Institute of Magical Arts and Crafts at such years. The parents congratulated the boy on his return and were happy to see him. The girl inquired if everything was okay on the way home, and Benjamin agreed with her. The father inquired about his studies, which of course were also going well. Cain was thrilled that he was only 14 years old and he was holding himself pretty solidly, more solidly than he had in his 35 years. The father decided to be honest and wanted to ask his son for a favor. He would want his brother to see to it that Cain was able to master the manipulation of magic during his stay. Cain had mastered earth magic and restoration magic, and he needed to master manipulating magic. Cain himself wanted to use magic as soon as possible, and while he was waiting for Benjamin, the guy kept running around and practicing. The older brother understood everything and looked at his younger brother with interest. The next morning came and Benjamin wished that Cain would tell him a few things before they got started. The skills that were given to him were magic circle magic, earth magic, and recovery magic. Actually, there was still an infinite amount of magic, but it would only complicate things if Cain told him about it. Earlier, the goddess had said that she would leave it deactivated, and Cain didn't know if it would be better to tell him now. He still decided to keep silent and told Benjamin that he only had 3 skills. Normally asking about statuses was forbidden, but since it was important, Benjamin would want Cain to be frank with him this time. Benjamin would want to know how much magic the guy had, and Cain thought it wouldn't be a big deal if he told him the truth. The guy revealed the status and said he had 1,800 units of magic. Benjamin couldn't believe his ears and decided to ask again. But after making sure it was true, the guy opened his mouth in surprise. This was about 10 times the expected result and about 6 times the amount he had with his 320 units. Big Brother realized that they needed to change the way they were training and told the guy that they were going to use a few things. He asked the Cain to draw his hand to him. The brother put the bracelet on him and told him that from now on he was to wear it all the time until he learned how to manipulate magic. The bracelet glowed and Cain opened his mouth in amazement. He told his brother that it felt like something was being absorbed, and his brother asked Cain not to take it off. It was a magical suction cup that Benjamin himself had developed. Normally, it was a device that prevented criminal magicians from using magic, and it sucked out all the magic power of the wearer. This special version could be customized to preserve the wearer's magic. It sucked out the owner's magic power until it reached a value of 10 units. Cain asked about the glowing stone and the guy said it had 10 magic power. Benjamin found it hard to believe that it really had 1,790 units. In that case, Benjamin suggested that they start, and to begin with, they would engage in the method of mastering magic manipulation, which consisted of 4 stages. They are concentration, circulation, release, circulation, and maintenance. Lesson 1 began with concentration. One needed to concentrate his magic power in the area below the navel, and the guy tried to do so. He just had to gather his magical power and the Cain concentrated. The hero felt a warmth starting to be felt in his stomach, and Benjamin was surprised that he did it the first time. The older brother suggested that something had changed in Cain, but the boy didn't know what he meant. He only felt a warmth under both of his hands, but it disappeared. Benjamin smiled and asked to make sure he kept that warmth until he lost consciousness. And then the hero literally spent a few days practicing, and after 3 days he managed to do it. Once he succeeded, the guy was ecstatic. Finally, his heat didn't dissipate when he lost his concentration, and Benjamin praised Cain for a great job. After that, Cain sat down tiredly on the floor and said he was tired. It was pretty hard for him, especially after 30 reps in a row. But Benjamin smiled and decided to move forward in that case. Cain felt wildly tired and shaky and told his brother that he felt a little stiff. He offered to finish for the day, and Benjamin was fine with that. But he also reminded Cain that he was not allowed to use magic until he learned to control it. And without his help, he wouldn't be able to use magic for at least a year. Benjamin said that in that case he would leave his little brother and go, and Cain thought he was the truest demon. Thus began their second lesson on circulation, and Benjamin said that first the lad had to try to concentrate. The hero did the same thing as before and concentrated completely. Cain could do it more smoothly now and, smiling, thought he was smart enough. But he would still have time to prove himself. Now his older brother asked him to try to move the gathered magical power to his chest. One had to visualize it slowly rising to his chest, and the hero took his advice. Cain did not realize what was happening, for she did not move at all. And so 10 minutes passed. The guy fell to the floor again and said she wasn't moving at all. Benjamin suggested that he had a hard time getting started and gave his help. The older brother asked Cain to concentrate again and put his hands on his stomach. His magic power was forming into a ball, and now it was going to hurt a little bit for Cain. But he had to be patient. Benjamin held his little brother to keep him from falling, and the boy screamed. Tears welled up in his eyes and he said it hurt a lot. But it was the process of widening the narrow magical paths so that magic could pass through them more easily, and it was naturally painful. Cain fell again, and Benjamin said that they have put their best foot forward today. He smiled and told his younger brother that this was the circulation. He could achieve mastery if he moved it from lower abdomen to chest, from head to chest, from left arm to right arm, from right leg to left leg, and from left leg to lower abdomen. Cain almost cried and thought that his older brother was really a demon. It had been 5 days since the incident of severe pain, and lately, Cain had been casting wary glances at Benjamin from time to time. Benjamin speculated that he had probably been too hard on Cain last time. But there was no time to lose, and Cain told his brother that everything was ready. Benjamin didn't think the lad could do the circulation so quickly, and Cain asked him to take a look at it. The hero concentrated and thought about the fact that when the magic power that was moved again is placed in the lower abdomen, it seems a little thicker. Cain suggested that he could now make his paths wider by adjusting the magic within himself. Benjamin laughed and told the kid that was great. The overtime work that had become a habit in the days when Cain was a slave of the company caught up with him here as well. He didn't finish practicing even when his brother Ben wasn't around, and he was glad he was doing well. Then came the third release lesson, and Benjamin was asked to put his palms together in front of his chest to make a circle. Then the circulation between the rings had to be made and the palms had to be perfectly aligned. At this point, Cain did not realize what had happened. He told his brother that he hit his right hand with something and couldn't transfer the magic. Benjamin thought about it and offered the boy 3 options. The first option involved helping with circulation. In the second option, he could reduce the magic a bit, try again, and the third option was to increase the magic and try from scratch. It was as if a dark aura was flying over Benjamin, and he asked Cain which option he would choose. Cain saw the demonic side of Benjamin again and had no doubt that these 3 options should definitely hurt him. Benjamin was surprised when the guy chose the first option. He put his hands on Cain's back and asked him to start the cycle again. At that moment, the hero felt the magic of Ben's brother flowing into him, and his form of magic became thinner and sharper. But then Cain cried out that he was in pain again, and it did not come off at all, as if it was being externally influenced. Benjamin praised the guy and said that his magic power had entered his left hand and he did well. The guy continued to circulate it. The hero needed to release the magical power from his body, and that was what was called releasing it. Cain looked at his brother with tears, and Benjamin thought his brother said something. But the hero immediately became silent and said that he had not said anything. Now Cain had to try to circulate by withdrawing his arm a little and making a circle, and when the magic passed, it would become easier. In this way 2 hours passed. The hero exclaimed that he was able to do it even when he took his hands away. It was right, and thanks to Benjamin's harsh lessons he was able to master the release. It was time for the fourth lesson of sustaining. Maintaining was dangerous, so they would be practicing outside of the house. Benjamin asked the boy to never lose concentration in the middle of an exercise. If he did lose concentration, he should raise his hands up diagonally in front of him. The hero did not understand why he had to raise both arms diagonally. Benjamin suggested that he try to start by circulating, gather enough magic, and then move on to releasing. One was to clasp it between his palms and twist it into a sphere. Cain listened and did as Benjamin said. The hero felt the magic flowing out of his body while continuing to release at the same time, and it was not good. At some point, there was an explosion that scared even Benjamin. Before Cain could realize what was happening, he received a powerful slap from his older brother. As he had told him earlier, he needed to raise his arms diagonally forward when he lost concentration. The hero looked in surprise at the large hole he had created. Thus, he almost hurt himself when he didn't follow his brother's instructions. Magic was not a toy and he had to be responsible when he used it. Cain hung his head, thinking about the fact that it wasn't a toy. He was sure that he had made a mistake somewhere, but to go to another world and not master magic was the worst. But the truth was that it was much more dangerous if he made a mistake. Benjamin was surprised when Cain asked him to teach him again, and this time he would keep his word. He promised not to make any more excuses or whining and asked his brother to finish his training. Benjamin smiled and suggested to Cain to start from the beginning in that case. 4 days passed after that. By this time, the protagonist was able to master the skill of manipulating magic and it was added to his status. The guy jumped for joy and said that he had succeeded, and Benjamin clapped his hands. He congratulated the Cain on a job well done, and it was unusual to gain an additional skill so quickly. The boy bowed his head and thanked his brother for his help. By the way, Benjamin wanted to say that if he could pass this training, he would be able to attack without spells. Benjamin showed his brother his power and created an explosion. From the explosion, a pit 5 times larger and deeper than Cain's pit appeared. The boy opened his mouth and assumed that his brother was from the world of Dragon Ball and decided to never cross him again. It was 2 years after the new year and Benjamin left. Alice and Cain waved goodbye to their brother and were sad for their parting. Cain's training was very hard, but when he first learned how to control magic, he experienced a real sense of achievement. Now from that moment on, he could use magic to its fullest potential. The hero remembered the Benjamin bracelet and decided to take it off before he ran out of magic. Cain was going to use the method his brother had taught him. He focused and used concentration, circulation, and sustaining. Cain created his personal defense in the form of stone hardening. The hero created a pair of medium stones and slammed them against the wall. He succeeded, and the guy's eyes glistened. Cain was jumping for joy and was insanely happy for himself. He wondered what he could use besides rocks and holes. Cain knew that he could create stones, but he had to see about holes. The guy gathered magic, concentrated, and tried to create a hole. He got an even small circle, and this hole was very small, which frustrated Cain. The hero felt his legs pumping up, and his magic power was already running out. He had only used 20 magic power today because the magic sucker had sucked the rest. But that wasn't enough for him for today. Thus, the hero increased his level by practicing with Benjamin. Eventually, the hero was able to raise his new level and saw it in his status. Cain abruptly jumped up from his bed and noticed that he had accidentally fallen asleep. Apparently, it was already evening. The hero was surprised when he felt more magic in him than usual and decided to open the status. After he removed the magic suction cup, his magic was fully restored. Until now, he had 1/100th of his magic power, and he just wasn't used to this feeling. He was quite pleased to face such a large number. In that case, the guy decided to start practicing magic right now. Lydia met him on the way and asked him where he was going. It was almost lunchtime and Cain awkwardly said that he didn't go to it. The hero realized that if he told her that he had been practicing magic instead of studying, she would be furious. The boy lied and replied that he had been studying letters with his sister Alice and was a little tired, so he decided they would go for a walk. Lydia smiled and such an answer pleased her. She knew he needed a rest and apologized for her doubts. Cain became embarrassed and felt guilty. He mentally apologized to his mother. Cain went out into the courtyard and was surprised to see his pit. He thought it must have disappeared after a while. It was permanent magic, and if he wasn't careful, someone could get hurt. He had to get rid of it somehow, and an idea popped into his head. He decided to try to do it and used magic on the pit, ordering it to be removed. The hero thought it was awesome and the hole disappeared. Thus, it was possible to erase the events caused by the magic. The guy had the feeling that it took twice as much magic power to delete as it used to create. He would need twice as much magic to remove as he used to create, and that was something that only wizards with a lot of magic could do. The guy smiled and decided to investigate this point. After that, he created many holes. Once the holes were created, he used removal, and it seemed to Cain that earth magic wasn't that bad. So the next day came and the hero jumped up early in the morning. His eyes were shining and he wanted to practice magic again. Alice saw her brother and thought he was lucky to get out every day, but she had school again today. Alice almost cried and told Lydia that she didn't want to do math anymore. Lydia wished her good luck studying with Cain today, but the girl didn't know what she meant. The girl clarified that she was supposed to study with Cain, but Alice replied that he was always outside. Lydia stared at Alice incomprehensibly and Alice also looked at Lydia questioningly. Meanwhile, the main character was in the backyard and decided to try to make a rock. He ordered the stone to follow his will and then turned it into a smooth stone cube. Cain bent down to it and thought an ordinary stone would appear, but it was in the form of a block, and it was a success. The boy jumped for joy and decided that today he would do earth magic again. Each time the guy created more new blocks of stone, and he felt like some kind of builder. It was time to summarize his day. The hero looked at the verification results based on the assumption that circulation was being used. When the spell is cast, a hole the size of a manhole and 10 centimeters deep is formed without much thought. If the depth is imagined, the hole is formed at the imagined depth, but its size becomes smaller. A hole of the same volume appears. If you imagine the bottom of the hole after it has been created, it becomes deeper. If you repeat the cycle several times, the volume that can be created is twice as large. If the circulation was tripled, the volume that could be created would triple. The walls of the hole would collapse, and if you hit them hard with a rock or something else. If the hero used his limitless magical power, he could easily build a cellar and dig a well. This would not be difficult for a Cain. As for the stone, the length of one side could be changed according to the image, but the volume did not change. Cain tried to imagine a shape other than a square, but nothing but a square worked. Using a loop, the length of one side became 15 centimeters. At double repetition of the cycle, the length of one side became equal to 19 centimeters, and at triple repetition of the cycle, the length became equal to 21 centimeters. By casting the spell with a clear representation of a number, or by including the words 2 or 3 in the spell, the side length can be increased. Casting a spell while channeling magic into the soil reduced the expenditure of magical power. Converting soil to stone consumed less magic than converting magic to stone. Since stones of the same size could be produced, the hero wondered if large quantities of stones could be made to build walls and roads. Cain opened his status and thought with a smile on his face that earth magic was very useful. The hero was about to continue practicing in the same manner when suddenly Lydia called out to him. Mother Lydia was together with Alice, who had finally found him. As it turned out, Alice had told her everything, and Cain had lied about going to school. Alice called it a complete injustice that only Cain could play outside. Lydia pulled the boy along, but Cain meant that he was studying magic himself. But no one listened to him, and he ended up at the same desk with Alice. The hero sighed heavily. He could easily read and understand the contents, but he was forced to do meaningless spelling. And now he was a 35-year-old man doing exercises for a 6-year-old child. So it went on and on. It had been 6 months since Benjamin had left, and as a result of Cain's constant training, his level of earth magic had risen to 2nd level. In addition, he learned magic manipulation and the skill of infinite amount of magic power changed to active. By the way, he also learned the skill of avoiding training for science. He went outside to observe the plants. Now that Cain had learned all his skills, he needed to see what was now available to him. He had 3 more abilities added to his skill set, which included an earth rampart, a field on the ground, and the creation of clay. The earth rampart created an earth wall 1 meter wide by 2 meters high and expended 12 units of energy. The field on the ground plowed a field 2 meters long by 2 meters wide, creating a soft, fluffy field. The energy expenditure also consisted of 12 units. Creating clay involved creating an imaginary shape using sand. The energy expenditure was also 12 units. Using an earth shaft, Cain could make a target for a stone bullet. The other 2 skills were also very useful. However, many people would call earth magic a failure. Earlier, his parents had told him about doubts about his future. But Cain did not see this as a misfortune and decided to practice again today. The hero created a big wall and after that used stone bullets in it. Cain was delighted that it could not be broken by stone bullets alone, and he decided to see how many shots it would take to break the wall. After the 10th shot, he still managed to break through the wall, and it was quite strong. Suddenly a man approached the guy from behind and suggested that Master Kane was practicing magic. A man named Gardy smiled and remarked that he was great at it. Gardy was the gardener and coachman of the House of Senrose. He was a large man in his 30s with a scar over his left eye and missing one arm. He had previously lost his arm during a battle with demons, after which he was employed at the Senrose. But even with one arm, he could operate a cart and tend the vegetable garden and flower beds. And although he looked intimidating, he had a very gentle character. Kane smiled and asked the Gardy what was the matter. The man thought it was time for him to plant Satsuma sweet potatoes for the winter, and so he was going to make a field for them. The hero loved this type of potato, especially when they were baked and they were very sweet. Satsuma was the earthly equivalent of sweet potatoes, and it is a precious sweetness in this world. In that case, the man decided to go plow the fields, and the hero wished him good luck. Kane looked at the pile of stones and he felt uneasy that it would all have to be removed. The guy used the removal skill and the pile of rocks disappeared. When everything was cleaned up, Kane turned his attention to the work of the Gardy. Gardy was trying very hard and digging through the hard soil where there were many weeds and fallen rocks. Apparently he had a lot of work to do. Kane turned his attention to his skills of earth burning and digging the ground with the creation of clay, which were on the second level. The hero called out to the Gardy, after which he approached him. The hero offered him his help, but the man was not convinced. Kane was insistent and wanted to try something. The protagonist told the Gardy that he wanted to try using earth magic, but didn't understand what it meant. Kane asked the man what size he would like his new Satsuma field to be. Gardy took a rake and visually showed the dimensions to the boy. He outlined the field and visually, it was the size of a badminton court. The hero decided that now he would have to exert himself and focused on his magic. After that, the hero directed his magic to the field and applied the digging earth skill. Gardy called Kane's earth magic simply amazing, because the soil just now was quite hard and in an instant it became soft and pliable. The earth digging skill plowed the soil, making it soft and fluffy, and the hero knew that digging the earth would be perfect for the fields. Even if on a small scale now, when the level rose, whole hectares could be stripped. In that case, the hero decided to try harder and used earth digging many times. Soon Kane was finished and their plowed field was ready. The man was delighted with Kane's work. Gardy was shocked that his 10 days' work was already finished. Taking the boy's hand, he thanked Mr. Kane for his help. It used to take him a long time to plow with one hand, but thanks to the earth magic, he could start doing other work in the remaining time. The hero even felt embarrassed at being thanked like that. The man decided to go and get the guy some potatoes. Smiling, Kane looked at the beds and realized how hard it was to farm in such a world. He hoped his earth magic would make farming a little easier. At this time a Gardy came up to him and said he had brought potatoes. The hero was shocked to see the Gardy planting seed potatoes, as he thought they should be planted as seedlings. Gardy didn't know what he meant, because they always did that and the Satsuma were always planted like potatoes. The hero realized that the knowledge and technology of growing crops was completely different from his old world. The technology teacher at the middle school was telling them that if Satsuma was not planted with seedlings, the harvest would not be very good, so he wondered if that was true. Kane asked Gardy to share the seed potatoes with him, because he wanted to build a Satsuma field and grow Satsuma too. The man agreed and offered to set up next to him and he would take care of everything else. The hero was overjoyed and thanked the man. Kane looked at the potatoes and thought about what he should do with the sprouts. He looked around and found nothing suitable, and he wondered if something could be done with magic. He noticed something that could help him, and all that was left was to think it through in his head. The hero used magic to create clay. The guy was thrilled that he was able to do it, and he made a real thing using clay and earth. Kane did a good job and thought he could use the thing for almost anything. He decided that next time he would have to make some utensils. And so, within a few days, his potatoes from seed began to sprout. The man told the guy that it was just amazing and all the seed potatoes sprouted. At the time, his fields had pretty meager sprouts. By the way, the hero was once told exactly the same thing. If you plant sweet potatoes from seed, the probability of germination is low, and the yield will not increase. One had to take care of them, and that's what his teacher had told him. Gardy asked Kane's permission to plant his seedlings, and the guy of course agreed. He also thanked the Gardy for his help. The hero said he was going to make some beds, but the Gardy didn't understand what that meant. As it turned out, the knowledge and skills of growing a crop here are completely different from the past world. It was a bit difficult to explain to the hero, so it was better to show him in practice. First, the fields had to be plowed, and the hero used the skill of digging the ground. He made a 6-meter field and all that was left was to make a good trench. After that, the guy used magic to create a hole. Eventually, Cain managed to create real beds and exclaimed that he had succeeded. Seeing this field, the guardian was speechless. The hero explained to him that the raised soil was called a bed. It helped drainage and caught the sun better, so the soil warmed up and the crops grew better. That is exactly what his teacher in middle school had told him, and he should be thanked. The man thought it was amazing that Mr. Cain knew so much about it. Guardy did not know there was such a method. He wondered where the guy got such knowledge from, and Cain lied and said he got this knowledge from the skill of the land. Guardy was glowing with happiness and thought that the earth magic skill was so versatile. Cain felt embarrassed and mentally apologized to Guardy for his brazen lie. But finally, this earth magic was starting to be useful, and he used it for many different things. Cain was studying with Alice, and the teacher was telling them a new arithmetic problem. Alice was not very good at solving two-digit arithmetic problems, and the teacher decided to explain it to her again in more detail. But suddenly Cain told the teacher that he could do addition and subtraction with one number without any problem. Alice had difficulty with two-digit arithmetic problems, and Cain thought that she was good at solving one-digit problems, so she would soon be able to do two-digit problems if she tried hard enough. The hero was embarrassed that he was 35 years old and only wrote letters. Suddenly Cain had an idea, and he never wondered if there was an abacus in this world. He thought it would be quite useful to have one on hand. It could be used even in this world, without electricity. The hero started writing and decided that he would do it after school. When lessons were over, the boy went out into the yard and thought about the shape of the abacus. Actually, he had taken lessons on the abacus, so he was quite familiar with it. There's no way to put that on a resume, of course, but with the knowledge, Cain could get a good image of it now. The clay had to be malleable for a hero, and the guy said about it. Cain visualized addition and subtraction and multiplication and division in his head. He wanted to make his own abacus and applied the creation of clay to the object. Moments later, Cain held the object he had created in his hands and said that it made a shuffling sound and worked. All he had to do was apply it. But as soon as the hero touched the bill with his finger, it began to crumble. The hero was horrified when they eventually broke completely. He assumed that he had not visualized the image well and was upset. In that case, he decided to remake the abacus by imagining it made of iron. He created it in the form of stone, but it turned out not to be strong enough. This time it turned out to be quite strong and should not have broken so quickly. Cain tried the object in action and compared it to playing an iron violin. It was fun for him to play, having the skill, but if he was a beginner, it would be difficult. The hero needed a little trial and error for the result. Still, he made it and enjoyed the work very much. The 8th abacus turned out to be a little larger than theirs on the ground, and it was a little difficult to play balls on it. But the sound didn't bother him too much. The important thing was that it didn't break, and Cain hoped it would help his sister. The hero also looked at the 2nd and 5th abacus. He could honestly say that it wasn't easy to use them, but maybe they would still help. Later, the hero had to come up with an answer to the question of how he came up with all of this. Cain assumed that there was already something similar in this world, and if that was the case, it was still a little off. He felt sorry that brother Benjamin wasn't here at the moment, so he decided to ask Mother Lydia about such things. Cain walked past his father's study, who was apparently agitated about something and clutched his head. The father did not know what they could do to pay off the family debt. The hero did not quite understand what debt he was talking about. At that moment, a maid stealthily approached him and asked Mr. Cain what he was doing here. The boy jumped on the spot from surprise and replied that he was looking for Mother Lydia, and the girl replied that she was in the library. The hero sighed heavily and thought that was close. As he ran to the library, he wondered if it was true that they had debts. He was afraid that their family might have fallen apart because of it. After all, he had only lived with them for 6 years. Cain clenched his fist and he couldn't let that happen. He didn't want to see these people sad, but he didn't know what he should do. Cain only had the magic of the land and the knowledge of his past life. He could make their land bigger and richer, and if he used his knowledge, he could help his family. The protagonist accidentally learned about the financial difficulties of Heiro's house and decided to reform the estate to help in any way he could. But he didn't know where he should start. If he did nothing, it might soon be too late, and Cain wondered what he could do right now. But for now, he needed to find Mother Lydia and ask about the bills. The boy made his way to the library, but thought he was still too young to get permission to enter. He had heard that his ancestors collected books, so they had a more extensive library than most barons. Cain called out to Lady Lydia, hoping she was on the spot. The girl was sitting at a table by the lantern, reading a book. She motioned for him to come in, though she was rather busy right now. Cain could smell old leather and paper in here. He hadn't realized that their library could have so many books. The girl smiled and assumed that this was new to him, and next time she promised that she would ask the hatchling for Kane's permission. After all, now that Kane had learned to read, he probably wanted to take something here. The guy thought that the atmosphere here had changed somehow, and it was probably from Lydia's glasses. He wanted Lydia to look at something and noticed a glowing book on the shelf. He wondered what the book was about. Lady Lydia didn't know what he meant, and Kane thought he blurted it out without thinking at all. He was referring to the shiny book on the right side of the top shelf, and Lydia assumed that was what he was talking about. She picked up the book the hero had pointed out, but she didn't notice any glow at all. Once the hero opened it, it turned out that the book was about how to grow rice, make miso, soy sauce, mirin, ketchup, sauces, and other condiments. It talked about recreating electrical appliances through magic. The book was called the Hero's Book, and that struck Kane as a bit odd. The expression on his mother's face changed, and she was shocked that a guy could read what it said. Kane didn't think about it and read it on automatic. He looked closer and saw that it was all in Japanese, but the girl had already asked the maid to urgently call Luke and Randolph. Later, the hero found out about everything. This book was written by a brave hero 12 generations before Kane and was passed down in their family. Apparently, at some point his ancestors became unable to read the writings of the great hero. This could not have happened, but in fact these writings were in his native language from a past life. There was no way the hero could say such a thing, and it was quite a predicament. Thus, through the book, Kane gained access to the archives and Randolph taught him how to use them. And the hero had no doubt that this brave hero was a reincarnation like him. He was a Japanese who had been summoned to another world to exterminate demons. He eventually managed to make peace with the Demon King and had a child and lived happily ever after. But he continued to miss Japan and left behind a book of things that might be useful to reincarnated people like Kane who might someday come along. This is the essence of the hero's book. Kane didn't realize that there were other reincarnations besides him, and he didn't know that there was any hero here. Such a thing could definitely shock, but there was too much information for Kane and he decided to think it over later. The guy looked at the bills and decided to go about his business from the beginning. He had failed to ask Lady Lydia about the accounts last time, and in that case, he decided to use this book. Kane made his way to his father's study and saw the couple at tea. Lydia inquired of Kane what was the matter. The boy would like them to see something and showed his parents the score. It seemed to him that his father was not entirely surprised, and apparently there was already an abacus in their world. Kane was also worried that they wouldn't want something made by a child. The father asked the boy what the thing was that had a lot of balls on it. The hero took the instrument in his hands and said it was an abacus used in arithmetic. He explained to the parents that the marbles on this thing represented the number 5, and it was as if the girl and the man were hit. They clapped their hands and told Kane that it was just great, which surprised the boy. The father agreed that it would be much easier and faster to solve math problems this way, and Lydia called for Randolph. The butler bowed to the mistress and the father asked the Randolph to look at the thing. Kane explained it to him just as he had explained it to his father and Lydia. It made sense to the butler, but he had never seen anything like this before in all his years of life. Kane smiled, for he knew it did not exist here. Randolph asked Mr. Kane how he had created this thing, and Kane was confused. The hero realized that it would be too strange if a 6-year-old knew the abacus so well and he could get in trouble for it. He said that it was written in the hero's book, but it really wasn't. Lydia was once again convinced that the hero really could have read it, but that was not what Kane meant at all. It just had pictures in it, and he made the item using earth magic. Kane had already figured out how to use it, and the numbers were in the language of their country, so he kind of understood. He never would have thought he could solve the arithmetic they went over in class in such a simple and straightforward way, and Alice would be very happy to have Kane give her such a thing. Father concluded that such a thing could only be made by Kane. The butler understood his father and asked Mr. Kane how many such things he could make in a day. But the lad only needed earth as material, so he could make 100 or 200 pieces in a day if he worked hard. The butler said that was great and offered to make them right away, and the lad was fine with that. The butlers provided the lad with a primer to work with and put it on the table. In that case, Kane decided to start and make an object out of clay. After that, he used the skills from clay in front of his surprised parents. In a couple of moments, the bill was ready and the girl hugged Kane saying that it was fantastic. It was just amazing, and the butler suggested that, so perhaps they could rebuild the family Sen Ross. Lydia stroked the boy's head and the father asked his son to do him a favor. He didn't want to pressure him, but he wanted to ask Kane to make the scores redundant. Of course, the hero could have done it, but he didn't realize what they needed such a quantity for. Omitting this question, he understood everything and agreed. The father patted his son on the head and thanked him for his help. That's what they did. The hero spent every day making abacus and gave Alice a few pieces. Before he knew it, the mountain of 2,000 abacus was complete. It looked rather strange to him, for he just wanted to make one item for his sister Alice. His father was going to take this abacus to the commercial guild, and if everything worked out possible, he would start receiving royalties. The hero was surprised, and the father laughed, thinking that the lad probably didn't understand such a thing yet. But Cain understood so many things that it was better not to tell. The father asked Randolph to take charge of the preparations, and the butler obeyed the order. The hero became curious and went to the guild hall with Randolph, and so his abacus was brought to the trade guild. The guild secretary listened incredulously at first, but eventually his eyes lit up. After successfully registering the abacus, they had to add a new special insignia. It was in case someone else released a similar product, so there was nothing they could do about it. The hero suggested that if a similar product came out, there might be a fight over authenticity. Cain asked the merchant such a question, and the man replied that everything is the will of the god Hermes, the patron of commerce. Of course, no one would complain about the god's decision. Thus, after a few days, Cain was recognized as the first developer of the abacus, and his father and mother Lydia were very happy about it. But there was something that surprised the lad even more. Randolph sold his abacus and at 3 gold coins apiece and made a huge fortune out of it. In this world there were copper, silver, gold, and platinum coins that have a face value of 100 conventional units. If a copper coin is worth 10, a gold coin was worth 100,000, and all the abacus they sold for 6,000 gold coins. In other words, they received as much as 600 million yen, and it was too huge a figure that Cain couldn't really feel it. It was an insurmountable amount for him during his time as a company employee, and Randolph clearly knew what he was doing. The hero had no doubt that they had now dealt with the issues at home. His father replied that they had now solved the pressing problem of money, and while they had some time to spare, they needed to repair the castle walls and improve the roads before winter came. The remaining money, however, they would have to spend carefully. Cain noticed how his father really cared about people, and he was a true lord. The lad apologized to his father and offered to craft them some more extra abacus. The father was amazed that the hero could still manage it, and so the hero created 1,000 more abacus in a few days. Cain knocked on his father's door and told him that he had finished making the abacus. While his father was writing the document, he smiled and thanked his son for his help. He told him that he had helped them a lot this time and had saved the people a lot of hardship. The father stroked Cain's head and said he was proud that he was his son. The hero was pleased when the earth magic helped people so much. The father had already discussed with Lydia that he should be rewarded for such a contribution even though he was still a child, and asked Cain what he wanted. In a previous life, Cain would have asked for a share of the proceeds, but he was only 6 years old and there was no way he could spend the money even if he had it. Cain didn't know what to do, for he had nothing concrete. But if he didn't ask for something, he would be wasting an opportunity. He was still poor in desires from his past life. Then an idea popped into the boy's head, and he told his father that he would like to eat 2 satsumas the next time he cooked them. The father was surprised that his son's wish was so strange. He laughed and told the hero that he would eat 2 satsumas the next time they fried satsumas. Cain jumped for joy, and now they could look forward to tasting the delicious satsumas and continuing to develop their territory. The maid yawned tiredly and asked why it was always so hard for them to work in the morning. Her friend was in complete agreement with her, because it was hard to work the early shift, because almost everyone was asleep at that time. The girls were shocked when they met Cain in the hallway, who wished them good morning. The maids wished Mr. Cain good morning and noticed that he was up very early. The boy smiled and replied that he was going for a run, so he would be back for breakfast. He said goodbye and ran off. It was hard to believe that Mr. Cain was only 6 years old, and the maids were delighted to see such a strong boy. They were encouraged and decided that they should take an example from him. Butler Randolph also remarked that the morale of the maids was unusually high today and praised them for their good work. At that time, Cain began his preparatory exercises. In order to reform the estate, he immediately went into action. In the first place, it was necessary to strengthen his physical strength, so he decided to improve all his performance. He woke up at 6 in the morning to gain physical strength, and attended classes with Sister Alice until lunchtime. Afterwards, he practiced earth magic and magic manipulation in the training area. He also practiced recovery magic 20 times a day. He learned by reading the hero's book and other books of the library. And after 3 months, he finally improved his performance. He had additional items for earth magic and recovery magic, and Cain decided to familiarize himself with them. He had new skills for earth magic, sand, mud, and draining. Cain had to think before he would use these. He decided to familiarize himself with recovery magic. Earth magic went up to level 3, and sand magic expended 20 units of mana. It changed the earth within a certain radius to sand. Dirt magic also spent 20 mana and changed the earth in a certain radius to mud. Deutering, on the other hand, expended 30 mana units and evaporated 10% of the water from the soil, dirt, and sand in a certain area. Restoration magic went up to the second level. The healing radius had little healing of creatures within a 3-meter diameter radius of healing injuries and wounds. It could not heal missing areas or lost blood. After reading this, the guy thought that area recovery was a good thing. Besides, it would be useful to heal many people at once, but it was better of course if no one was injured. This magic was inherited from his mother Lenor, and he wanted to use it to save people. At this rate, Cain will learn the most useful magic. Before library class, the boy was going to check the Satsuma beds and met Gardy there. He praised the gardener for a good job and asked how the Satsuma was doing. The man smiled and replied that the Satsumas were doing just fine. The field he had sown was growing well, but Mr. Cain's field looked much better. The Satsumas planted from seedlings his way were just amazing, and almost all of them seemed to have taken root. The Gardy field also rooted better than usual, but not as well as Kind-san's field. The hero smiled and replied that next year he would start with the Gardy seedlings and it would be even more amazing. The man smiled and was in agreement with him. He offered to make a lot of Satsuma and surprise everyone. Gardy hefted a large sack and warned him that he was going back to the manor. Cain also had to go back again. It seemed to Gardy that after clearing the field it was a good time to rest, and it seemed like a great idea to Cain. As soon as they rounded the corner, a sad look appeared on Gardy's face. Cain didn't realize what had happened at first, but he turned his head and saw many footprints on the ground. Because of the rain the day before yesterday, there was mush on the road leading to the estate, and people would have to walk on it before it dried up. A man suggested that if they do not put sand on it before the master returns, ruts will form and the wagon will not be able to travel further. Gardy apologized to Mr. Cain and got ready to go get the sand, and the hero needed to go back. But the hero remembered that he could use his new earth magic. Suddenly the boy asked the Gardy to wait a little. He asked the man for a board or a large trowel or something to level the ground with. He needed something shaped to make the ground level, and the man understood him. Cain used his magic and decided that now was not the time to get tired and needed to help the people. He used the magic of mud. He eventually succeeded in clearing the road in the neighborhood of about 1 meter. The man came back and apologized for keeping Mr. Cain waiting. But the boy said he was just in time and should have tried to level the path out of the mud. The man noticed that the boy had applied his skills here and it was great. Gardy thought that if the path turned to mud, the ground would be softer and could be leveled more easily. It seemed pretty easy for the man, and now with the help of the kind he could level the ground much faster. After a while, everything was ready. Now they had to wait for the ground to dry, and Cain said there was not much left to do. Also, the boy wanted to try out his new magic, and now was the time. Cain used the magic of draining. Gardy was surprised when before his eyes all the dirt dried up in a couple seconds. The road was completely flat and the wagons could drive on such a road without any problems. But Cain thought it would be strange if they left only this section flat. He suggested that the man level the whole road before his father returned, and it seemed like a good idea to the Gardy. So they worked together to level the road to the house, and it took them about an hour to do it all. When it was finished, the man was delighted and Cain jumped for joy. Cain gave the man a high five and thanked him for the fact that they were able to clear the road in a very short time. But the Gardy thought it was all due to the magic of Mr. Cain's land. But they had gotten knowledgeably dirty, and they needed to go together to the well and clean themselves up. On the way to the well, Cain wondered if his father would notice the change. After all, he would be traveling down this road. But on the other hand, he often read his newspapers in the carriage, so maybe he wouldn't notice any changes. While the boy was studying in the library, someone called out to him. Cain looked at his father in surprise, and the man assumed that Cain had leveled the road to the house. The boy said that he and the Gardy were passing by and decided to help them, but apparently they shouldn't have. The father grabbed his head and apologized for scaring him. Just the opposite was true, and as they drove through the gates of the mansion, the vibrations disappeared altogether, and the man thought something was wrong. He had never driven on such a smooth and clean road and praised his son for a good job. The man gave him a gift of a silver coin. Cain was pleased that he had pleased his father and thanked him for the gift. He thought he would share it with the Gardy. The father stroked his son's head and remarked that it was very nice of him, but he would like to pay the Gardy separately, so this coin belonged to him alone. Cain thanked his father for this, and later the guardy thanked Cain for the prize. A few days later, after the rains, the hero noticed that there were puddles on the road again. He and Guardy had worked hard on this road, but if they leveled the road with the same method, it would be the same after the rain. The hero thought about finding a better way and asked his brains to strain. Cain got an idea and decided to make a road out of cobblestones. Just like in old Europe, he would like to craft a road based on knowledge from his past life. Besides, he would be able to make stone and earth with his earth magic, and Cain needed to write it down on a piece of paper before he forgot. After a couple minutes, the guy wrote down the plan for the cobblestone sidewalk. The first thing was to create a lot of stones and spread them on the road with magic. Also using magic to cover the road with mud, and it had to be 10 centimeters deep. Then dry the mud with drying magic so that the surface was slightly rough and not smooth. Then place the stones 1 centimeter apart from each other so they wouldn't stick. The guy took the sheet in his hands and smiled. It seemed to him that this was the least time-consuming way. Apparently, he had a lot of work to do if one did it at a spur of the moment, so he would like to start small and thought about the wells. He should have checked with Randolph, and he would also need Guardy's help, so Cain decided to inform him as well. Cain gave his plan to the butler and wanted his opinion. Cain was alarmed when the butler Randolph asked if he had made the plan himself. Randolph smiled and considered that the young lord appeared to have the qualities of a lord. Cain noticed the strange bright smile on the butler's face and had a hard time understanding what he was talking about. But everything seemed to be in order. The butler agreed and said that tomorrow they would go around more of the well, and he would report their plan to the head. Cain was pleased and thanked Randolph for his help, but the butler thought there was nothing to thank him for. But be that as it may, he estimated that it would take them about 5 days to finish all sections of the roads to the mansion. Cain thought that was cool and told Randolph that he was doing the same thing. The hero was sure they could shorten the timeline if they had a few more people, but their policy didn't allow for overstaffed hiring. Cain smiled and asked not to worry about that, because he would do his best to improve. The butler smiled and told Mr. Cain that he had grown up to be a smart boy, and like he was a different person after coming down with the injury. The boy was afraid that the butler might have suspected something, but Randolph bowed to him as if nothing had happened. A tear came to his eye, and he told the lad that they were glad to see Mr. Cain's progress. The lad exclaimed that they would definitely make sure that the cobblestones succeeded to the best of their ability, and Cain wanted to put his best effort into it. The boy waved his hand and told Guardy that he was there. They came with Guardy to the well behind the mansion and were going to pave the ground around the well according to the plan they had drawn up. The guy looked at their plan, and first they had to draw a line to delineate the area to work on. He took a stick and drew a rough line, and now it was the turn of the stones. In the name of Cain, the boy ordered the stone to be created. Guardy was surprised when Cain created about 300 slabs of stones and thought they would be enough for the road. Next, the dirt had to be taken up and Cain asked for help from the man. They turned the earth into dirt and laid out the stones, and after about a quarter of an hour the finishing touch followed and the boy used the draining. Finally it was finished and the Guardy exclaimed to the lad that he had succeeded. It was very much like cobblestone paving. Indeed, with this method, even if the ground flooded, all the stones would remain, so there would be no puddles, for the water would soak into the soil in the crevices. But in some places it was sloppy and Cain was embarrassed by the arrangement of the stones and the lumpy soil between them. But the Guardy saw nothing wrong with this and decided that it was normal. But apparently it was possible to work a certain amount of area in a day. They also had to come up with something to make the road in front of the mansion paved. Cain smiled and promised to discuss it with Randolph. He also hoped the Guardy would join him, and the man gladly agreed. In the meantime, Mistress Lydia approached them. The girl was looking for Cain and by all appearances was displeased. He had not come to dinner, and she had gone in search of him, and he was again digging in the mud. She wiped his face with a handkerchief and asked him to go and change his clothes. Cain asked to be careful, because that way he would stain his clothes, but Lydia asked him not to worry about such a trifle. She decided to talk to Luke about it again, and the boy sadly lowered his head for upsetting his mother again. But everything went according to plan and Guardy was surprised to see a smile on the lad's face. After lunch they went back to the well together and resumed the work of paving the ground around it. While they were working, the father and Randolph approached them. Apparently Mother had told him about the cobblestones and they needed to finish this road faster. After a while, Cain was happy that they had finished their work. Guardy exclaimed that Mr. Cain had done well, and the boy was glad that they had finished before supper. Randolph and his father were discussing something vigorously, and the boy thought their presentation had been a success. The father would like to formally offer Cain the job of paving the walkways at the mansion. Cain was thrilled that he was being offered a real job. Randolph had explained everything to his father earlier, and those cobblestones were just fine. That way they wouldn't have to worry about mud when it rained. The hero thanked his father for the compliment and thought that now he could practice earth magic more openly. And after the road to the mansion was built, his father wanted to offer him something else, but the man grabbed his head and decided it would be too difficult. The butler suggested that Luke share his thoughts with them, and the father said it was a pretty crazy plan. For a while longer the adults whispered, discussing something in front of the cane, and the boy waited for them in silence. He was very curious about what his father had come up with and asked him to tell him. His father would want the main street of their town to be paved with cobblestones in 2 months, and this surprised Cain. As far as he could remember, its length consisted of about 1 kilometer, and with 2 men the work would take about a year. The street was also up to 7 meters wide. His father had told the lad that the budget would be 200 gold pieces, and the hero couldn't imagine what was to come in those 2 months. But the father thought that their plan was not realistic anyway and decided that the road to the mansion would be enough for them. That was where he wanted to stop. But the hero decided that this was not true at all, and this was just the perfect opportunity for him. After all, building the main road was a big undertaking, and he told his father that he would do it. His father was surprised, but the boy asked him not to worry about it. He was sure they could do it if they had more men, and Cain was willing to come up with another plan to get them finished as soon as possible. Eventually, the father agreed with his son and said he would leave it up to him, but he asked Cain not to overdo it. Cain was thrilled to be entrusted with such an important task and decided to get right on with it. Meanwhile, the father asked Randolph for help, and the butler was ready to listen to his master. It was not until the next day, now, that the lad began to feel the pressure. Now they had plenty of money and plenty of people, but Cain didn't know if it would all work out. Now he had a meeting to go to, but he felt weak in his body. Cain walked into the room and saw the teacher with Alice. He didn't realize that today was the day of their class, though Cain had them for a few more days. The teacher was pleased that Alice had gotten everything right, and she was getting better at arithmetic as soon as she started using the abacus. Cain was happy when his magic gave someone a smile, and he wanted the others to be happy too. But now he had no time to be discouraged, and he was going to make it work. He entered the room and greeted the guardian and butler once more. Cain explained yesterday's work to Randolph and Gardy by drawing them a diagram. Gardy explained what was difficult about it then, and they discussed how to lay out the road evenly and things like that. Butler assumed that it would be difficult to finish the plan in 2 months without involving a lot of people, and the construction was based on kind magic, which accounted for over 70% of the work. The strain on the hero was simply enormous, but Cain was confident that he could handle it. It was hard to lay out the stones in a row, and in terms of magic it wasn't that hard. Gardy told Mr. Cain that he wasn't very good at magic, but Mr. Cain made the stones with magic, and he used it to turn the soil into dirt and then lay out the road. Gardy suggested that it was possible to turn the soil at once into stone with magic. Cain felt as if it had hit him, and he praised the Gardy for a great idea. First of all, magic is an image, so if there is a good image, using magic can make everything work out. Cain thought the Gardy was a real good boy, and the man was embarrassed. Cain immediately suggested they try it right now, and first they had to go outside and practice. After all, it was better to be wrong now than later. They would first practice on a small area and gradually increase the size. The hero asked the Gardy to draw a couple of squares, and the man set to work. Meanwhile, Cain will prepare his magic. The guy used circulation and with a stone spacing of 10 millimeters, and he needed to lay out 80 stones. So they circulated about 100 magic power, leaving room for control. The hero had never controlled so much magic at once, so control was about to run out soon. He decided it was time and touched the ground. Cain used his stone skill and commanded the stone to appear. Still, the hero managed to turn the earth into stone, but he was tired. Randolph bowed and told Cain that it was a great job for the first time. But the stones were uneven and the gap between them was uneven, so it came out ugly. The hero thought about it and didn't even know how he could fix it. The butler suggested he draw lines to make it easier to visualize, and Cain said that was a great idea. Gardy took a stick and drew out the field. The hero used his stone skill, and this time all the stones came out where they should. Maybe because it's easier to visualize when there are lines, but where they were drawn crookedly, the stones didn't line up neatly and were distorted. The hero thought about it and the Gardy had an idea. Of course, he had no magic and could not know anything. He had several friends who used magic, and they all did the same magic, causing the same phenomena, and everything was the same. But none of them could modify the magic, so far as Mr. Cain was concerned. Kane suggested that they use a board like a ruler and draw a straight line, and just for that he found the right one for them. In every situation he showed ingenuity and imagination, for it was the only way to find a new path. The hero smiled and asked the guardy to draw the line while he held the board. The man smiled and thought to himself that Mr. Kane was indeed an amazing person. Now Kane decided to try again and use the magic of the stone. Kane couldn't believe that they were already completing the road to the mansion. The butler bowed and replied that they would like to see Mr. Kane in action in the process of completion. As the Kane and the guardy were engaged in laying out the stones, the lad noticed his father approaching them. The boy told his father that they were about to turn the place into a stone sidewalk, so he asked his father to watch it. Kane ordered the stones to appear and used magic several times in succession. They ended up with a luxurious road to the mansion, and his father opened his mouth in surprise. The butler assumed that Mr. Kane would still manage to carry out such a crazy plan, and now it was the main street's turn. The happy Kane high-fived his assistant guardy. Kane, Alice, guardy and the butler arrived in town, and the girl asked Kane to stick with her, for it was easy to get lost here. Today they came here to inspect the paving of the main street. In general, the three of them were supposed to arrive here alone, but Alice followed them. The girl said that Kane was cheating and decided to go with them to the main street. The father was surprised that the girl was eavesdropping on them. Alice thought it was unfair that only Kane could visit the town, while she sat in her room and studied every day. Under pressure from his daughter, her father allowed her to go along with them. Kane felt sorry that their father could not marry her off, and yet this city reeked of waste mixed with food. Everyone behaved naturally, and only Kane thought the smell was strange. The boy asked Randolph how wide was the main road. He supposed it was about 7 meters. Roughly it was, but with each turn toward the castle gate it got wider, and finally it reached 8 meters. The narrowing along the road as it moved away from the gate had two meanings. It slowed the intruder's progress and made it easier to get to the gate. The main street sloped gently down to the gate and was about 1 kilometer long, which was quite a long way. The road was so wide that it could not be completed in a day or two, and a complete closure would have interfered with the lives of the locals. It could not be the same as the road in front of the estate. The hero decided that it would be better to think about it at home, but now he suggested that the adults should make a model of this town, and the guardy and the butler were surprised. Guardy assumed that Kane needed it for a project, and he was right. He just needed the model, and yet there was a big difference between looking at it from the ground and from the outside. The hero asked Randolph for an accurate map or diagram of the main road, and he could also introduce Kane to someone who understood the layout of the town. Randolph said he would come back and make some adjustments and then get someone in charge. Kane thanked the butler for his help. Kane, in the meantime, decided to take a good look at the town and set off through the streets. Kane thanked the butler when he picked them up by carriage, for it was hard to go all the way on foot. Randolph didn't see it as a problem and was sure that the man in charge would get here soon. A young woman unfamiliar to him approached the hero and introduced herself by the name Noel. She was the head of the maintenance department and was happy to meet the guy. She bowed to Kane and the guy got embarrassed. As soon as the girl smiled, the guardy's heart throbbed. The butler motioned for them to go to the conference room and Kane asked Guardy for a favor. The man didn't respond in any way and the boy called out to him again. Guardy apologized as he was thinking about something of his own, and Kane said that Alice had an appointment with Lydia, so she left. In the conference room, Kane bowed to the people and said he was looking forward to working with them today. But the butler told the boy in his ear that he should not bow before the vassals because he was the son of a nobleman. The boy assumed that Noel had brought them a map and measurements, and the girl held out the map to him. She also said that if you lined up all these parchments in a row, you would get a map of the capital city. Kane thought it was a bit large and asked if they had any copies half as big. The girl had similar ones, but warned that they would not be as accurate. When they would make the model, they had to make it half the size. The map was too big to look at and Kane needed to take a closer look at it. At this point, Guardy and several men came into the room and told Mr. Kane that they had brought a large amount of soil as he had requested. The man suggested that Mr. Kane had enough of that amount, and the boy thanked everyone for their help. Noel did not understand what Mr. Kane was going to do to her, but the Guardy was sure he would do something incredible again. The hero wanted to make a model based on the map. First, he had to concentrate and visualize the model based on the map data. Then he applied the clay creation skill and made a full-fledged large model of the city on the table. This city was in 3 planes and Noel thought it was simply amazing. As expected from Mr. Kane, it was a very convenient way to understand the city at a glance, and it was just incredible. The girl didn't understand how this was possible, since he had studied the map for only a few hours and afterward recreated an entire city. But the places that the hero didn't have time to examine today he created with his imagination, so they weren't very good. Considering his abilities, it was already possible to use this ability to create siege tactics for the city as well. It would be a big problem if other houses or royal families found out about it. The hero offered to move the model to his desk and was sure it would be more convenient to look at it that way. The butler noticed that Mr. Kane spoke of the work done as a trifle. Depending on how one used his abilities, he could do good as well as evil. Randolph felt that they should keep a close eye on Mr. Kane so that bad people would not use him in the future. Looking from the other side, the main street sloped gently down to the gate. If they built a ditch, it would prevent water from accumulating, but Noel wasn't quite sure what Kane was talking about. Ditches were called ditches, which were built at the edge of the road so that rain and other water that fell on the road would run into the ditch and not accumulate in puddles. The hero the same recalled that he had learned this from his book, and the girl was delighted at how much Mr. Kane knew. Still, he had a lot to learn. Gardy asked Mr. Kane what he planned to do with the water that flowed into the ditch. Usually it was drained into the sewer system, but this city had no such technology, so the hero asked Noel how the city's sewage was now treated. The girl thought that nowadays the city sewage was just flushed out of the house, which made the guy shocked. It was a pretty unhygienic way of cleaning, and it was a wonder they didn't spread an epidemic or something. That's why he felt so bad walking around town. There were places in the big cities that treated the water with slime. Everyone else apparently knew what it was, and now Kane was the only one who didn't understand what it was all about. The boy asked Noel what it meant. Slime cleaning. It was a method of taking water outside the city walls and storing it in a tank, which was then automatically cleaned by the slime. When the slime found debris or dirty water, it would emerge and clean everything. To be precise, the slime absorbed and dissolved all substances except water. The hero didn't realize that there was such a method here and how different the world was cool. He had never heard of it before, and in a world with no sewer system, cleansing with slime might have been the best way. Kane would like to bring this to their town and asked Randolph to make a hole leading outside the city walls. Also, they could not put the slime inside the walls, and the butler said it all depended on how Kane wanted to build it. Butler thought it could be done as long as it didn't affect the defenses. After all, there was no such precedent yet. Kane asked how far away from the walls it was safe to build the reservoir and suggested that the distance would be about 1 kilometer. But the girl said it didn't have to be that far. Slugs were weak demons themselves, and if too many of them gathered, the low-ranking adventurers would exterminate them. The hero was a little sorry that they would have to exterminate slugs for the sake of convenience, but that was apparently normal for them. After all, they would be rewarded for defeating them. If you integrate the current systems of this world with his knowledge from his past life, it would make a very nice city. And when the matter was settled, Kane suggested that they proceed with the plan. As a result of their discussions, they settled on one method of drainage. It was the method of diverting rainwater and building purification ponds. On both sides of the road they would make ditches about 30 centimeters in diameter, in which holes would be drilled every few meters to collect rainwater. The ditches go underground about 20 meters before the castle gate and extend beyond it. While the ditches are sinking into the ground 300 meters away, a purification tank is being built where the slimes are being cleaned. His father also joins in the process. Kane looked at Alice's drawings and asked her what kind of bird it was. Alice got angry and said it was a wolf of course and didn't understand what was wrong with the guy's eyes. Lydia asked Kane what design he could have made and the guy spread his hands. Basically, he could do anything as long as there weren't too many gaps. He asked mother, Lydia, and sister Alice to design the cobblestones. Kane thought the project would go more smoothly if he got them involved. They decided to add drawings to some of the cobblestones to make them visually pleasing. Lydia asked to be given a few days to think it over. Still, Alice's paintings were a bit avant-garde. In addition, the hero planned to close the main road to traffic for half an hour at lunchtime and half an hour in the evening. The reason being that it would be easier for people to organize if the road was only closed for half an hour. After a while, the people of the town became interested in Kane, and the workers protected Kane from strangers. Kane had to get the job done as quickly as possible so as not to disturb everyone's life and use the circulation. After the guardie finished drawing the lines, the hero touched the ground. Kane used magic to create a road and the locals were delighted, unable to believe their eyes. Meanwhile, the boy suggested to the guardie to continue. The hero built the road out of stone time after time, and the butler reminded Mr. Kane that almost 30 minutes had passed. The boy hadn't noticed how quickly the time had flown by. He smiled and admitted that he was a little tired. The locals were thrilled that the trail was easy to follow and so they could avoid getting dirty when it rained. As he left, the hero looked at the enthusiastic people with a smile. He was glad that the townspeople liked everything and now they had work to do in the evening. And so the work on the paving project continued. At the same time, the drainage work continued as well. As for the design, Alice and Lydia finally decided on it. It was decided to use the entire width of the road every 100 meters to create cobblestone sidewalks lined with floral patterns. The road would look very festive with images of lily, sunflowers, ginkgo leaves, and maples. The locals thanked the guy every now and then for his hard work, and if Mr. Kane worked hard, they were not going to fall behind him. Besides, they liked Mr. Kane's road very much and the children were delighted with it. The children imitated him while Mr. Kane applied his rock magic to making the road. Also, when the hero was in town, the locals would offer him a taste of their meat on skewers. Butler thought this was wonderful, for through the construction work they could better recognize the mood of the people. And a month and a half had passed since the road construction began. Kane and all the other inhabitants were delighted when their work was completely finished. Looking at the beautiful flowery road, the merchant said that now it would be easier for them to trade and shook hands with the lad. The elderly residents thought it was a real surprise in their old age. The girls threw flowers everywhere and thanked Mr. Kane for his work. He may not have been the chosen hero, but he was happy because the people around, thanks to his magic, were happy too. At this point, the hero was happy that he had gotten the magic of the land and it was finally over. The people looked quite happy, and it was great. Kane's father had never seen cobblestone streets in the capital, and maybe this would be talked about all over the country, and people would start coming from other lands as well. There was a real celebration in the streets, and all the people of the city were seeing Kane off. Kane's father asked for everyone's attention and warned them that their father-in-law was coming to inspect them. Meanwhile, Kane, Lydia, and Alice were playing cards and did not expect such news. Boarder Earl Shields from the neighboring fiefdom was Lydia's father, and for Luke, he became a relative by coincidence. Kane had also met him when he was only a couple years old, but he didn't remember him at all. He was too young then and didn't think they had formed a good relationship. Father took his head, remembering that he was a very strict man, and yet his visit is a complete surprise. Most likely, word had reached him about the paved street, and it was very nice of him to come here. Kane decided to check with his father to see how they would receive him. That was the thing, their house of Senrose didn't have that kind of specialization. But that was no trouble, because they would have the knights hunt the monsters in the area, and cook the demon meat. He shouldn't have been so cocky. Lydia took Hatch's hand and said that there was no need to try so hard, for the cobblestone streets would be enough. Alice was sad that they didn't have a pretty good meal to treat her grandfather to. The boy thought about the fact that the food in the Senrose territory looked rather plain. In his former world, he ate mostly store food, so he didn't mind homemade food at all, but now a special cuisine was needed. Suddenly, his gaze fell on the hero's book. The hero remembered it and was sure of what it said about cultivation and seasoning. He called out to his father and mother Lydia. He offered to serve him a delicious dish from the hero's book, and sure enough, Grandpa didn't know anything about it and would be surprised. The hero noticed the surprise on people's faces and assumed he had done something wrong. But the father exclaimed that it was a great idea, and Lydia was once again surprised that the boy could read the book. The girl and the man looked at each other questioningly, and Kane remembered that he had been hiding the fact that he could read the hero's book. But he was glad that they were nevertheless pleased with his offer. In the event that he could read the hero's book, it became unsurprising that he knew the uses of the abacus and the structures of the cobblestone sidewalk. However, this was for Kane knowledge from his past life, but he chose not to talk about it. In any case, now their time was pressing and it was worth starting. Kane decided to bring the hero's book while his father asked Randolph to get the chef. The Rose family's chef was to check that there were spices that Mr. Kane would name. Kane wanted to make sure the cook was familiar with the spices they would be working with. Having thus verified the spices and ingredients, the guy made sure that it contained things that existed in his former world, but not in this one. Thus, the hero received special permission to bring the book this time. Kane was glad that soy sauce and mayonnaise were present in this world. There was no ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, soybean paste, and sweet rice wine for cooking in this world. Of the ingredients, they had potatoes, tomatoes, onions, and garlic. The hero was glad that potatoes existed here, which he lacked the most. Goat butter was quite difficult to get here, and milk was also not available. It was available but unusable. But there were similar types of meat in this world, such as wild bull, orc, and horned chicken. The hero wondered why the names were so similar and if there was anything else he wanted to ask. Kane decided to ask the cook one last question. He handed the chef a memo and asked if there were any dishes in the memo that Chef Lloyd knew about. It included potato salad with ham and mayonnaise, macaroni salad, ham, onion, and mayonnaise, a meat dish of mostly ox or orc meat, chopped, rolled, and grilled, orc meat wrapped in thin bread and fried in butter, horn chicken seasoned with salt and potatoes, horn chicken omelet with eggs and sugar, and a final meat dish made with horn chicken. The chef didn't think he had heard or eaten anything like this except the first, second, and third. He inquired of Mr. Randolph if he knew of such a thing. Randolph was reminded of this meat dish made from meat scraps, but they were different in their boldness. Father suggested that the boys cook everything on this list. Besides, they had to taste all the dishes before judging. Lydia didn't know it could be done that way, but Father didn't understand why it couldn't be done. The hero reflected on the fact that his father is right and you never know what he will cook until you try it. The chief cook wasn't sure he could cook it, but Cain pleaded with him, for he was his only hope. The chief cook knew he would have to agree if the boy kept looking at him and begging in that voice. He finally agreed, and you might not be able to tell from the looks of it, but he had been a chef for years for a reason. He offered to let Cain do it and the boy jumped for joy. Eventually, Chef Lloyd managed to get all the ingredients together. He prepared all kinds of dishes by trial and error. Cain wanted to observe him, but the butler escorted him out of the kitchen, saying it was not safe. A few days passed and the cook thanked everyone for their patience. They finally finished cooking the dishes from the hero's book, and the cook asked to enjoy them. After seeing the various delicious dishes, Lydia, Father, Cain, and Alice were delighted. Lydia said that she had never seen food like this, and Alice noticed that it smelled very good. Father suggested that everyone try it first. Alice smiled and took her favorite meat, wishing everyone a good appetite. The girl recited the meat and exclaimed that she had never eaten such a meat dish, and it was simply delicious. Meanwhile, Lydia had taken dishes of a very unusual shape and tasted them. She could not believe that it was really an egg, and it turned out to be very voluminous. Her father was also delighted with the crispy texture of the meat, which was appetizing and delicious. Cain knew that home-cooked food from a past life looked like a feast here. He was sure that now they would be able to treat his grandfather and thank the Lloyd's chef. The man was happy and said he was honored. The character decided to change the name of the dishes a little and wrote them down as potato salad, pasta salad, chopped rolled and grilled meat, pork cutlet, carrage, and omelet. All of these the hero called hero recipes. He showed the list to everyone present and people applauded. Meanwhile, the man with glasses decided that he hadn't seen Lydia and her husband for a long time. He had heard that their territory had become known as Cobblestone Country, and they only had such things in the capital city. The man wondered how they did it and wanted to know the secret to developing their land. The day of Grandpa's arrival had finally arrived, and everyone prepared to meet him. Cain couldn't even count the number of times they had improved the food and fed it to him over the past month. His father smiled and remarked that their grandfather was on his way. Cain's father thanked the man for coming to them today from far away, and the grandfather paid attention to his grandchildren. He smiled at them and told them that they had grown up. Cain seemed to him to be quite a big boy already, and Alice would probably go to school soon, and now she was a real lady. The girl was so happy that she decided to formally greet her grandfather and bowed, taking her dress in her hands. They hadn't seen him for a long time and were looking forward to meeting him. Cain was surprised at how quickly Alice greeted him. Now he too had to greet his grandfather properly. Cain bowed and told Lord Frontier that it had been a long time since they had seen each other and he was now 6 years old. But it seemed to the man that Cain had called him before, as he had called Alice grandfather. The man missed it and Cain felt embarrassed. After all, he must have treated him wrong. Lydia had suppressed her father for his jokes and now Cain didn't even know what to do. The man laughed and apologized for his behavior. Frontier noticed that the hatchling had lost weight, but luckily he was in good physical shape and the man thanked him for his concern. The father asked the man to pass into the house and Cain for some reason thought the encounter would be scarier. After they went inside, the frontier man apologized for disturbing them with his visit. The merchants who came here talked so much about the beautiful streets of this city that he himself wanted to see everything with his own eyes. It was a great honor for Luke, and his eyes sparkled. Besides, Grandpa hadn't seen Lydia in a long time and inquired about her health. Lydia smiled and replied that apparently she was fine. She was becoming more and more like her mother Aisha, and the frontiersmen had a wonderful feeling as if they were at home here. Lydia inquired about her mom, for she thought she was coming along with him. It turned out that that was exactly how it had been planned at first. But recently she hurt her leg and had to stay behind. Lydia was frightened and thought that something had happened, but her father asked her not to worry, because it was nothing serious and she was fine. She just fell while tending the garden at the villa and there was no reason to worry. In that case, the girl smiled and said she would visit them soon, and the Frontier laughed. Frontier sipped his tea and decided to get down to business. The drive from the town to the villa was beautiful, and he was once again amazed at how different it was to see and hear about something. Once the road was paved, the vibrations lessened and the speed increased, and the different colors of the road made it easier for the carriages to move, so the street was just gorgeous. Luke thanked the man, saying that they really reduced accidents between carriages and wagons because they determined where traffic passed according to the different colors. The design of the cobblestones was also Alice and Lydia's idea, and since the cobblestones are very easy to count, the locals gather and wash them themselves. This was true, and perhaps due to the effect of the cobblestones, there was an increase in the number of volunteers who cleaned the streets every day, especially the stores on the main road. Cain had heard that because of this, garbage used to be taken out even during the daytime, and now there was a completely different situation. Cain was grateful to the residents, but he wondered why they started cleaning up. He thought that the people wanted to preserve the cobblestones, for they were quite beautiful. This turned out to be the plain truth, and the people could not let the cobblestones that Mr. Cain had worked so hard on get dirty. It made sense to Grandpa, and so this was the effect that was to be expected. He wished their town was also cobbled, and everyone present realized this at once. After all, that's what he came here for, and his words might have seemed like a simple request from an old man. But it is quite different when this conversation is lord to lord. If they say the wrong thing, they will have to pay the price. They were talking to the Earl of Frontier, who is also his father-in-law, and one had to be as delicate as possible. It became clear to his father, and if they ask him to do so, he will do his best to fulfill his request. The old man smiled and said that if they were as good as they were here, he was in full agreement. Luke didn't doubt it and asked Randolph to bring him something. The butler understood and followed the order. Cain thought that everything had apparently worked out properly, and they were family after all. That's what his father knew, that everything would have to be handled for free. Grandfather was surprised when he saw the model of the town, and father said that they made such a model first before laying the cobblestones. Their budget consisted of 500 gold coins, and that was 25 times what Cain had spent on the project and didn't know what would happen now. Grandfather understood everything, and the details were clear to him. He would like to order it immediately, which surprised everyone present. Seeing their faces, the man thought that they were in some kind of trouble, but the father said that they would certainly do the construction soon. Usually there was some sort of bargaining going on, and Cain didn't expect to be asked to do this without any negotiation. That was the power of the Lord of the Frontier, and he could afford whatever he wanted. The more Grandpa looked at the model, the more amazed he became, and he wondered who made it. Given how much information he had gotten, such a question begged to be asked. Father happily stated that Cain had made it using earth magic. Grandfather was simply shocked and said it was amazing. Luke offered to tell them all the details over dinner, but rushing things doesn't lead to anything good. Lydia smiled and said that they had prepared a room for him and offered to rest while she showed him around. The father thanked his daughter and agreed. As they walked down the hallways, Lydia asked her father not to be too hard on the hatchling. The man laughed and apologized to her, for it had been a long time since he had teased him and it looked like they had worked hard. But he had seen everything with his own eyes, and they had worked hard at it as a family. Grandpa was glad that they were all getting along well, and he was pleased to see Luke growing as a person. But he told his daughter that this model city was dangerous and asked if anyone else knew the details. The girl frowned and replied that no one knew about it but them. They had put a ban on everyone in their house, but the grandfather thought it was more than just a model town and they should be wary. Lydia understood perfectly and bowed, thanking her father for his concern. Now that they had settled the matter, the man wanted to know what they were having for dinner tonight. Last time was fine, and Lydia laughed, saying that it was fine and their dinner tonight was special. In addition, tonight's menu included revived recipes from the hero, and Grandpa marveled that they were able to make dishes based on his recipes. Lydia smiled and promised to tell all about it after dinner. Grandpa was pleasantly surprised to see the wonderful food from the hero's book. He took one of his favorite dishes and tasted it first. His eyes immediately rounded and he exclaimed that it was very tasty. This egg dish was simply amazing, and if he wished, Luke could give him today's recipe. He would want Aisha to try it as well. The old man thanked and thought about the fact that Aisha would love it. The hero and the cook were happy that their recipes were successful. Grandpa ended up eating 3 more plates of egg rolls, and the cobblestone story progressed. And so the next day came. They needed Cain and the others to stay with them for a few months if they wanted to do the work, and Grandpa was worried that it was okay. But Lydia smiled and told her father that it was okay, and she had already informed Cain. She would accompany them in that case, and the old man rejoiced. They had a lot of adjustments to make, so asked him to wait for them until the new year. Other conditions had to be discussed with the civil officials, and they would talk about the results when they arrived in their territory. Lydia agreed, and the old man looked at Cain. He smiled and winked at the boy, saying that he was counting on him. Cain jumped up on the spot and willingly agreed with his grandfather. After their conversation, the family escorted Grandpa on his way, after which they exhaled a sigh of relief. Luke still managed to talk without being rude, and Lydia thanked him for that. Cain could agree that Grandpa was a very heavy man, and he felt drowsy from all the tension. He needed to practice more magic so that he could smoothly realize the cobblestone project. In the meantime, he needed to take a break, and sleep was the best medicine. Some time after the departure of his grandfather, the hero decided to revisit the archives. In the last few days, he had only been so busy with road repairs and hospitality that he had completely forgotten to read the hero's book. Now that he had a spare moment, it would be a good idea to do so, and there was probably something about local magic in there. Cain opened the doors and noticed that the maids and Lydia were in the library. They were discussing something and laughing. The girl noticed Cain and told him to knock first before entering. Cain felt embarrassed and apologized, but Lydia smiled and asked him to just be more careful next time, and the guy agreed. He assumed that something good had happened to Lydia's mother, and the girl realized that the hero had noticed it. As it turned out, she received a letter saying that everyone would be coming home for New Year's Eve this year. The letter came from Arthur's oldest son. It informed that all three of Arthur, Benjamin, and Chris would be celebrating New Year's Eve at their house. The brothers, Arthur and Chris, were coming home, but the boy hardly remembered them, for he was very young. Finally, all four brothers would get together. Rumors had reached the capital about their cobbled streets, and the letter talked about that too. Lydia stroked the boy's head and told Cain that it was wonderful. The hero asked how long it had been since all the brothers had been together, and Lydia wondered. Chris hadn't been back since he entered the academy, and it had been about 3 years, so she was looking forward to it, and needed to ask the Lloyd's chef to cook something else delicious. It was very nice, and now the hero understood why his father had fallen in love with her, for she was a sincere woman. Cain smiled and said that he was looking forward to meeting them too. Cain picked up the book and thought about how he was looking forward to the day when his brothers would return. But for now, he would continue reading the hero's book. The boy flipped through the book trying to find where he left off, but suddenly he noticed something interesting, because the pages at the end of the book were sticking together. One of the pages was hollow, and in it were glasses. The hero didn't notice them at all, and the glasses were quite small. Cain didn't even know how to use them. Suddenly the glasses lit up, and it was just amazing, because they took on the perfect size for him. Apparently they had the magic of sizing them to fit the reader. Cain decided to test them in action, and as soon as he put the glasses on, an electronic large page book appeared in front of him. As it turned out, it was an instruction sheet thanking the guy for using this artifact, as well as a manual on how to use these glasses. As he could already notice, the goggles were enchanted for increase and decrease spells. They were small when not in use and the right size when in use. And it was these glasses that allowed the use of the analyze skill. One had to place the object he wanted to analyze in his field of vision and concentrate on it. A window similar to the one displaying the results of analyzing the object would immediately open in front of him. The hero hoped that these glasses would be useful to Cain. That's what his instructions said. Cain decided that this was just fine, and now he could use the analysis. He thanked the hero for such a gift. Cain remembered that he had magic that required the analyze skill, and now he could check that and open the status. He had the first level of the skill. Magic could be broken down into magic components and recorded on scrolls, magic stones, and so on. The advanced skill required a separate analysis skill to parse magic into magical formations. To write the parsed magic into a scroll or magic stone required 10 times more magic than the parsed magic consumed. To use written magic required 3 times as much magic power as analyzed magic. The advanced skill required a separate analyze skill to parse magic into magical formations. The boy rejoiced and knew that he could now use the analyze skill to learn everything. He thought he could use the magic formation he had given up. He decided to see what skills he could use at the first level of magic. Creating magic ink was available to him. It took 30 units of magic to create and draw a magic circle, and the magic circle created converted the analyzed magic into a magic circle and created a magic circle. There was also magic circle transfer, which transferred a previously created magic circle to an object. There was no spell for this magic, and one had to say the name of the magic and visualize the effect and use it. The procedure involved creating magic ink, analyzing the magic, creating a circle, and transferring the magic circle. The boy decided to start by creating the ink. He concentrated. He needed to visualize that he had a bottle of ink in the palm of his hand and direct magic at it. To his surprise, it worked and he had the ink bottle in his hands. Cain was surprised at its beautiful color, and such things delighted him. Next was to create a magic circle, but first he had to analyze the magic. Cain didn't understand what was wrong, because he thought that it was possible to analyze magic already. He noticed the information of a magic circle of the first level magic in front of him again. -1 meant 0, meaning it was practically unusable, which disappointed the guy. Apparently, he would have to continue for a while until the skill level went up. Cain had a magic lamp in front of him, and it occurred to him that he could analyze it. As soon as he focused on the lamp, many windows of information popped up in front of him and Cain opened his mouth in surprise. There were too many symbols he didn't understand. This was the magic analysis. The hero assumed that he would use the creation of the magic circle after reaching this state, but he had to try to do it, so he applied the magic of creating a magic circle and got a pentagram window. Apparently, it was the magic circle of a magic lamp and the guy analyzed it. It was a magic circle of light from living magic. The hero didn't understand how he could analyze it if it was a level. Besides, light magic probably didn't have a level. He also didn't understand what life magic was. He decided to leave it alone, and for now, he needed to do something about this magic circle of light and transcribe it onto parchment. Cain smiled and said he was ready and hoped it would work. He used the magic of transcribing the magic circle and heard a hissing sound. The magic circle on the panel began to disappear. A jar of ink opened and transferred the same pentagram onto a piece of paper, and Cain was delighted. Cain took the sheet and noticed that it turned out well, and finally he could use the magic of the magic circle. He wondered how it worked and used on the magic circle to analyze it. He could use it by touching the light magic circle and life magic and channeling the magic power. These analysis points were quite useful, and Cain had to thank the hero. We should have tried it right now and see what would happen if we touched the magic circle and let the magic flow. The hero used magic on the pentagram and it disappeared. The guy rejoiced and exclaimed that he had light magic. There was another window in front of him about the magic of the magic circle. It converted the analyzed magic of the first level skill into magic circle magic and recorded it on scrolls, magic stones, and so on. It was an advanced skill, requiring a separate analyzing skill to parse the magic into a magic circle. Cain wondered if there was something like this before. He clicked on the panel and exclaimed that it was cool, because there was a light magic circle in front of him, and it could be that he could store the magic circles he created. This way he could collect magic circles of different kinds of magic, and if he collected them and copied them onto his tools, he could get a lot of things. The hero assumed that he could use almost all kinds of magic and a sword that sparks fire or an ice magic stick. It was an incredible power. It was simply amazing because more and more possibilities were opening up in front of Cain and more could be done. While the hero was doing the dance of joy, Alice walked the corridors looking for Cain. She didn't understand where he had disappeared to, because it was almost dinner time. Alice noticed the ajar door of the library and looked inside, where she saw a guy in a strange pose and was surprised. The locals really wanted to see the work of the Cain, but the guardy asked everyone to step back. The hero used his magic and made a stone path, and people were delighted. Some told Cain that he had amazing magic and some just thanked him. The hero thanked the guardy for their help and thought it was time for them to go back, when suddenly someone told Cain that he was good. Cain heard a familiar voice and turned around in surprise. Standing right in front of him was his brother Ben, who had returned home. This was a real surprise to Cain and he greeted his brother. Benjamin said he saw him on his way to the mansion and decided to say hello first. Cain assumed he was alone, but as it turned out, Benjamin arrived with his brothers. With him was Chris Senna Rose, a 14-year-old boy and the third son in the family. Also Arthur Senna Rose, who was 18 years old and was the eldest son of the house of Senna Rose. The brothers greeted Cain and remarked that he had grown a great deal, for they had not seen Cain for many years. Arthur seemed just huge, and he was almost as big as his father. Cain hesitantly called him brother, and Arthur was surprised that Cain did not remember him. But he didn't blame him and reintroduced himself to the lad. He pointed to the skinny brother and said his name was Chris and asked the guy not to forget it. Arthur rubbed the guy's head and Cain noticed that he just had big hands. Chris suggested that the hero didn't remember him either, even though he didn't play much because of his mother. And that's why from now on they would be friends with Cain from now on. Chris hugged his brother and Cain felt embarrassed. He told his brother that he was too close. Benjamin suggested that the brothers leave it at that, since Cain might have gotten confused. Arthur suggested they talk about it at home, and Chris asked Cain how he would get back. The hero replied that Randolph would be coming for him soon, but in the meantime, he and Gardy had been working on the cobblestones recently. It was as if Chris had just noticed his work and was surprised. Chris looked around and said that when he was Cain's age, all he knew how to do was swing a sword. Arthur also looked closely at the cobblestones, not believing that Cain had done it. Meanwhile, Benjamin clenched his hand into a fist. He had previously learned about construction from his mother's letter, and he had only learned how to use magic last year, and he had already made such progress. Benjamin's face showed that same devilish grin, and he told his brother that Cain was not so simple. In that case, he offered to teach Cain something else. The guy got a shiver, and it seemed to him that his brother looked like a demon who hadn't changed at all over the years. Above all, Arthur liked that people were happy, and he wondered when was the last time they had been so animated. Arthur began to think his brother was a genius, and the others backed him up. As Cain was praised, he became more and more embarrassed. The butler smiled and suggested that if they praised Mr. Cain one more time, he would fall down and ask them to leave him alone. The butler called the brothers boys, and all three of them simultaneously asked not to be called that. The locals were happy to see Mr. Cain's brothers, and they were apparently closer than ever. No one in the town had any idea that they had already returned. The brothers waved to the locals, who congratulated them on their homecoming. They must have been very popular, and the butler said they were going back to the mansion and asked Cain to take a seat in the carriage. Mother Lydia met the brothers with open arms and welcomed them home. Butler Randolph told Arthur that the master was waiting for them in the parlor. Benjamin noticed Alice in front of him, and the little girl welcomed her brother home. The brother smiled and told Alice that she had gotten a little taller since last year, and the girl was pleased. Arthur told the girl that it had been a long time since they had seen each other, and she had grown a great deal since their last meeting and had only gotten prettier. The brothers chased Alice into the paint, and she laughed. Mother and sister Alice looked pretty happy, and Cain thought that the brothers were really happy to see them. It was great to have them all here today. The father greeted his sons and hoped that their journey had not been a long one, and suggested that they have a good rest today. While they were talking, Cain noticed that the father looked very happy and like such a friendly family. After dinner, the father called the three brothers into his study to talk about something. Meanwhile, Cain had some free time and decided to go to the library and read the hero's book. He still wanted to build a sewer system, for they would need it to flush toilets and then expand the city walls. Cain contemplated building a bathhouse as well. While the hero was reading the book, he heard someone calling him and turned around. It was his brother Chris, who had finally found him, and Cain asked what he could do to help him. Chris and the rest of the brothers wanted to see him and offered to go to the room with him. Cain agreed and suggested that something might have happened. Chris looked around and thought it was amazing that Cain was reading books. For one, he was a bit of an amateur and rarely went to the library. Cain hoped they were okay and said he would clean up the place. Chris walked into the room and told his brother Arthur that he had invited Cain to join them. The character was surprised that even the brothers didn't go in there without permission, and they were apparently serious about their role. After they were allowed to enter, Chris opened the doors to the office and apologized for the intrusion. Cain also followed his example. When Cain entered the room, he saw Arthur and Benjamin in front of him, who were drilling him with a stare. Arthur said it was great that Cain had joined them, and he called him here to have a little chat about their situation. He thought it was a little early, but Benjamin consented. Cain didn't see anything wrong with it, and Arthur thought that the boy already understood that they were a noble family. They had 4 boys in their family, including him, and Arthur wanted to ask him directly. Arthur questioned the hero and asked him if he wanted to be the rightful heir. The boy was struck as if by lightning and did not realize what a ridiculous question out of the blue. A legitimate son is the heir to a title. In other words, he was asking Cain, the 4th son, did he want to inherit? Of course, Cain was surprised at the suddenness of this question, but he already knew the answer. He answered briefly and said that he did not want it. He just wanted to help his brother Arthur in some way for the good of the kingdom. But that was all. This answer surprised the older brothers, who stared at the boy. After a short silence, Benjamin laughed and told Arthur that he had told him this earlier. Arthur scratched his forehead and couldn't understand why they all kept giving him the same answer. Chris replied that when he looked at their father, it seemed to him that he was surrounded by paperwork every day, and seemed to be swamped with it all day long. The brothers laughed, understanding each other. But now that Cain had joined them, Arthur decided to ask the brothers again. His goal was to make the Hay-Rose family rich, and that would require the strength of the whole family. Arthur bowed to his brothers and asked for their help. Chris and Benjamin smiled and put their hand on their hearts, but Cain was surprised at such a request from his brother. Chris and Benjamin were ready to serve their family. The hero looked at his brothers confusedly and followed their example. He put his hand on his heart and said the same thing. The brothers laughed and Arthur rubbed the boy's head. That was the end of the formalities, and tonight they would discuss the development of the region. Arthur suggested that the brothers talk about who could do what and who could do what. He was particularly interested in Cain. Arthur started with Chris, but the boy didn't understand why he was first. Benjamin sighed heavily and admitted that he had nothing. After dinner, while Cain was gone, his father thanked everyone for the reports, and he had one request for his brothers. As they already knew, Cain seemed to have changed a bit since his baptism, and maybe it had to do with his skills, or maybe it had to do with the fact that he had become more knowledgeable. Benjamin sensed this too when he was teaching him, so the father would like the boys to keep an eye on Cain during his stay here, and he also asked that they teach the reckless Cain how to defend himself. The brothers gladly accepted their father's request, for Cain was their dear brother. Benjamin thought that Cain was very interesting, and he could not help but teach him different kinds of magic, even though Cain was only 6 years old. While Benjamin was studying and writing down the information on a sheet of paper, he heard a knock on the door and asked to come in. Cain was apologizing to his brother, and he needed to talk to him about something. It was something along the lines of counseling, and Cain had a few ideas for improving the quality of life on the estate, and he could really use Brother Ben's wisdom. Benjamin agreed and asked first of all to tell him about his ideas. There were 2 things that Cain wanted to build. The first thing was a bathhouse and the second was a sewer. Benjamin had never heard of a bathhouse and thought it was a big barrel of hot water. Cain replied that it was in the bathhouse was a very large barrel that could fit 12 people at once. The hero believed that access to it would make people's lives more hygienic and reduce disease. Another system is a sewer system where rainwater, sewage from toilets and so on is sent to a canal underground in the city, and the sewage is treated off-site and returned to the river. He thought this would also improve sanitation in the city and reduce diseases. Benjamin thought about it and was sure that people would be happy when it was finished. His brother thought that these were wonderful ideas. It was really great, and Benjamin couldn't even believe that he had come up with something like this at the age of 6. It was as if he was hinting at something, and Cain got a shiver. The hero justified himself by saying that he learned about everything from the pictures in the hero's book, and there was no way he would have thought of it himself. Well, since he said so, Benjamin should have believed him. The hero's book was not only valuable information, but also a great excuse for Cain, and he mentally thanked the hero for that. Benjamin wanted to know what he could do to help Cain, and the guy started with the bath. He would need a lot of hot water, so if the fire magic that Benjamin possessed had magic for making hot water, Cain would want him to show him how to use it. His brother didn't have fire magic to make hot water, but he did have magic to raise and lower the temperature of water and other things. Cain replied that this was more than enough. Cain asked to be shown this magic, for he wanted to make a magic circle with the magic of the magic circle and create a magic tool. Benjamin was surprised that he could do such a thing with the magic of magic. The older brother began to question whether there was a limit to how much Cain could surprise him, because with the magic circle, any tools would be available to him. As expected of Brother Ben, he had already realized the usefulness of the magic circle. Cain replied that of course there were limitations. It could only conjure up to -1 level of magical magic, and it required 10 times more magical power to activate than the original. It made sense to Ben, and 10 times the magic power was quite a lot. By the way, he wondered how much magical power Cain had now, and a shiver ran through the guy. Cain lowered his head, but still decided to confess since Ben was his brother. Cain hesitantly admitted that his amount of magic was infinite, and Benjamin smiled. Suddenly, he laughed loudly and said that the guy never ceased to amaze him. He tried to calm down and apologize to his younger brother. Benjamin thanked Cain for telling him and promised not to tell anyone about it. Cain was happy about this and agreed. Cain was growing up faster than Benjamin had anticipated, and he should be more careful about it. He decided to go back to the topic of magic that changed temperature and said that it belonged to the 2nd level of magic. But unfortunately, it was the wrong level. It meant that the magic that changed temperature was a level 1 magic. Benjamin asked Cain how he checked what kind of magic it was. Cain replied that it was called life magic, and for whatever reason it could be turned into a magic circle. There was no magic that could change the temperature, and if he wanted to use life magic so badly, there was hot water. Cain was surprised at this answer. It turns out that anyone can be taught the magic of life in the church, and he could go and talk to his father next time and learn it. The hero didn't realize that there was such direct magic. Thus, the hero found himself in the church and thought about the fact that it had been a long time since he had talked to his father about the magic of life. So commonplace was magic in this world, and apparently Cain was the only one who did not know it. Alice smiled and motioned for Cain to come inside rather. By the way, Alyssa was with him when he was talking to his father. Lydia offered to get together with Alice before they went to church. The other day they had already taken the measurements of the traveling clothes he would wear on the trip to the Earl of Shield's estate. Apparently everything was ready, and they had only to add the finishing touches. Alice and the hero went shopping together that day, and he had to put a lot of things on and off. He just hated that kind of stuff. Trying not to remember it, the hero walked determinedly towards the church. The priest welcomed Mrs. Alice and Mr. Cain into the church. The hero replied that they were welcome too, and the priest already knew what they were here for. He asked the children to follow him. They passed into one of the rooms where there was a large image of the goddess Lady Guardia. Right in front of it was a tablet, and the priest said they would use it to learn the magic of life. The woman asked the hero what kind of life magic he would like to learn today. Cain replied that he would like to learn hot water, but would also like to learn other good magics, and if there were any. The priest said that such a thing was possible, and Cain asked to be told about the history of the magic of life. The woman agreed to do so, but only briefly. The magic of everyday life, as it is properly called, was invented and spread by a hero in the past. The hero was said to have created it just out of the mere thought that there should be magic that would make life a little more convenient, even if one had no skills in magic itself. Cain had already realized that the same hero had created the magic of life, and in the beginning only the hero could grant the magic of life. There was even a story going around the world that the hero ran away for a while because too many people came to see him. It was horrible, so he created this stone slab and was able to grant life magic in the church. In this way, the hero made it possible for them to get paid for it. Cain thought about the fact that this magic created by Reincarnation from Japan a long time ago, it was still useful to people today. That made him even happier. There were a total of 10 living magics created by the hero, but only 9 had reached their days. The female priest enclosed a list with the different types of living magic. It included light, blowing, cleaning, kindling, cleansing, purifying, cooling, hot water, loudness, and magnifying glass. The woman said that Cain could test how much magic he could get by putting his hand on the tablet. She suggested he try it, and Cain agreed. The hero approached the tablet and stretched out his hands to it. As soon as he touched it, light poured out of the tablet. The priest noted that since it glowed 4 times, Mr. Cain could learn up to 4 varieties. Cain replied that he would like to have hot water, light, and a magnifying glass in that case. He would learn another one later when he wanted to learn other skills. The woman asked him to leave his hands where he had placed them and began reciting spells in another language. The hero stared in surprise at the tablet, which glowed under his hands and then went out again. The woman said that apparently he had successfully learned magic and asked him to check his state board later. While the hero was surprised, Alice also wanted to learn life magic and asked the priest to do so. Cain didn't expect that learning was very easy, and he didn't even feel anything. But now it was in his power to use hot water to make hot water for baths. He immediately became anxious when he thought about what was coming. Cain was happy for Alice that the girl was able to learn purification and light. The girl smiled and said that if she could only learn one magic, she would have chosen something else, but she was glad she could learn those 2. Cain thanked the priest for today and handed her a bag of donations. The woman thanked the children, and then they headed for the exit. Before leaving, Cain bowed to the image of the goddess. The girl noticed this, whereupon she ran up to the boy and followed his example. While the children were coming down the stairs, Alice suggested to her brother to go home, for it was soon time for dinner. As they were coming down, a woman's voice asked them to stop. It was a young girl that tearfully asked the stranger to treat her brother's wound, and she would definitely give the money later. The guy apologized and said that they had asked everyone to pay on the spot and could not accept payment later. But the girl pleaded and asked for an exception. Cain and Alice were horrified, for no one reacted to her words. It became clear to them that if they made an exception for her, others would want the same thing. Unlike the hero's previous life, there were no guarantees here, and that was how this world worked. Still, Cain had healing magic, but Alice asked him not to. After all, if he healed him now, they would have people coming to them every day, and he couldn't heal them all. Cain realized this but wanted to help. Besides, he could see in Alice's face that it was hard for her to leave things alone too. Nevertheless, Cain decided to do it and grabbed Alice's hand and told her that her palm was damaged. He let people know with his whole look that he was going to use a restoration spell. Cain asked the priest if he could use restorative magic on his sister Alice. The priest replied that if he was going to use it on Alice, it was acceptable. The girl tried to stop the guy, but the hero ignored and said he couldn't see anything and asked her to step back into the sun. Once they got closer to the people, the hero used the area treatment on her. The girl was surprised when she looked at her wounded brother's legs. His wounds had healed, and Cain, as if nothing had happened, told Alice that her arm was healed. He pretended he hadn't noticed how people got caught up in the magic and, laughing, said he screwed up. Cain motioned for Alice to go home and lastly thanked the priest for today. As the carriage with the children and drove back, Alice told Cain that he always came up with something, even though it wasn't allowed. Still, she was proud of Cain and smiled at him. Cain laughed and asked her not to mention it about her mother, and then he would give her 1 satsuma for an appetizer. Alice got excited and initially didn't even believe it. That's how they got back home. The hero was lying on the bed in his room and thinking about how to build a bathhouse. He thought about what he would need first, and he was pretty sure he had been to a bathhouse before his reincarnation. First was to walk through, then take off his slippers, then to undress in the locker room and go to the bathhouse. He wondered how he would get a shower, for he needed a bathtub and a chair. Soap was well made here, but the boy didn't know about towels. He wondered about making a sauna next time, too. Cain got his father's approval to build a bathhouse, and they decided to make one near the back entrance of the mansion. Since Ben's brother was away with his father hunting, it was decided to build the bathhouse together with the guardy. Cain asked the guardy what size he would like the bathhouse to be. If it was too small, it would be difficult to get in, and if the bathhouse was too big, it would be difficult to keep the water hot. While Cain was thinking about this, the guardy called out to Mr. Cain. Turns out the man had absolutely no idea what a bathhouse was, and the guy was shocked. He remembered that this world uses magic to cleanse itself, so some people didn't know what a bathhouse was. There was no need to do a bathhouse if there was magic, but such a thing was a problem for people who were unfamiliar with purification or had no way to donate to the church. Earlier, the maid was telling the children that it was bedtime and asked them to use purification before going to bed. She used magic on Cain's hands and his hands became clean. She did the same thing to Alice. But the hero realized that the magic only cleansed the dirt on the surface of the body, but did not remove the fatigue inside. He wanted to bask in the bath and relax to relieve the fatigue of the day. For this reason they had to build a bathhouse, and the hero decided to tell the guardy what a bathhouse was. He told him all about it and it became clear to the man what it was. Then it must be big enough to fit 3 adults in it. When the mistress goes there, the maids will also go and wash it. Cain had completely forgotten about this and the guardy was already envisioning this picture. He tried to get the vulgar thoughts out of his head. In that case, Cain decided that it had to be big enough for more than 3 adults. They also needed a window, and the hero asked the guardy if it was possible to make one. The man did not know this, so he decided to ask Mr. Randolph. In addition to the window, they also needed a roof, and the hero didn't know if he was supposed to present a stone wall with voids, or whether he would build a stone wall and then remove its contents with magic like last time. He had to think about the order or he wouldn't be able to make a bath. When Cain had tried this before, he had failed at joining a stone wall on top of another wall. He would have to think it over carefully before he started building. Meanwhile, the guardy returned and thanked Cain for waiting. He brought Mr. Randolph with him, and also Mrs. Knoll. She was in the house, so he called her too. The girl was glad to see Mr. Cain and greeted him. She heard that he needed help, so she came here and the hero said she was very welcome. The butler asked what window Mr. Cain was talking about and the lad said it was for ventilation. Therefore it should not open too wide, and it should not be seen from the outside. For example, if you slide the bottom part from the inside to the outside. It was quite a laborious job, and the butler promised to have the windows delivered to the house tomorrow. Cain would also want them to bring a few more of different sizes and formats. In the meantime, Noel could help him with the construction of the bathhouse. It would consist of a bath, a washing room, and a locker room. The locker room should be able to accommodate 3 adults and also have facilities for storing extra hot water. The hero thought he could create the space by hollowing out the walls, but it was difficult to make interior walls or a bathtub. The girl asked if he had to create everything with his magic. After all, he was making things that could only be crafted with magic, and other things could be taken over by a guild of masons or carpenters. And then it was as if it hit Cain, and he agreed with her. It was exactly like that, and it was hard to do everything with magic. They only need to make the walls and baths with magic, and the roof and the rest with normal construction. The boy thanked Noel for her help and the girl bowed. She was glad she was able to help him. Cain then decided to proceed to create everything but the roof and applied his stone wall magic. The high wall created by the lad surprised those present, and next he wanted to make openings for a door and a window. But first, it was necessary to knead the magic in the right amount to make it fine and split it into several small pieces. Kane used the removal several times in a row and made window openings in the wall. The butler told Mr. Kane that it was gorgeous and Noel thought it was amazing. Gardy asked what they would do with the ground and Mr. Kane replied that they would do low paving and a stone floor. The bathtub will be slightly sloped to allow for drainage and asked everyone to take a look at it. Hiro used a stone wall and made it a sloping cobblestone floor. Gardy told Mr. Kane that it was great and it took shape, but there were still a few gaps. It also needed a little sanding. Noel was surprised that the guy wanted to move on to the next stage, because he had saved them a lot of time and effort on the construction. Next, Kane decided to move on to the bathtub, and it seemed to Noel that he was a very ambitious man. The hero used again the magic of the stone wall, but also used removal and got a full bathtub. Gardy finally realized what it was and Kane fixed it with clay. Now all that was left to do was fill it with hot water. But suddenly the guy remembered that he hadn't thought of the plumbing, but Noel didn't realize what was wrong. The hero became uncomfortable and didn't know what he should do about the plumbing. He should have built a little closer to the well, and now he had to think about the water pipe. Noel didn't know what that was and decided to ask Kane about it. The guy explained that it was a pipe through which water flowed and it was hard to carry water back and forth every time they used the bathroom. So he decided to build a pipe so that water would flow from the well to here, which would reduce the amount of work of carrying water. But even if you make the pipe out of clay, it would probably mix with the soil when used for a long time, and everyone around them wondered. A thought occurred to Kane and they could use a soil press. They needed to press the surface of the earth to smooth and harden it. And if the soil hardened like concrete with this, then they could continue the work. Kane turned to the boys and said he needed their help again. The hero told his father through Randolph that he was going to run a water pipe from the well to the bathhouse, and with his permission he resumed the work. In the process of making it he made several mistakes. Noel also figured out how to make the slope and offered to help them. They were like a maintenance department. It took a lot of time, and yet they still managed to get it in order. The hero thanked the boys for everything, and everyone was happy to help Mr. Kane. Everyone was happy to finish the construction and was healthy tired. Now all that was left to do was to fill the tub with water, and the hero thought that he should fill the tub halfway first. This was also not an easy job and Kane asked everyone to try their best. Everyone took turns pumping to fill half the tub. Later, the heroes got tired and took a short break and Kane created simple chairs for everyone with magic. They had to figure out the best way to do this every day. And when their work was coming to an end, the hero used hot water to add more boiling water to bring it to the right temperature. The butler said that the water had risen halfway in the tub and asked Mr. Kane what he was going to do next. The guy suggested they watch and applied hot water magic. Kane was delighted as he had never used one of these before and it was very convenient. He tried out the temperature of the water with his hand and decided to heat the water some more. And now everything was perfect. The hot water in the tub would rise about 3/4 of the way up and then stop. Everyone had done a great job, and the hero would say that the temperature was now just right. Guys suggested that Gardy, Noel, and Randolph try it out. The men had never seen a bath like this before, and Gardy noticed that it was quite hot. But perhaps that was a normal reaction when someone saw the bathtub for the first time. In Noel's opinion, it was just right and wasn't too hot or too cold. Gardy thought he could definitely soak in it for a long time and Kane suggested they all enjoy it together. The girl dipped her feet into the hot water and was delighted. She hadn't realized how warm it could make her feet and the Gardy remarked that the bath quickly relieved fatigue. Kane was pleased that everyone liked it and was sure that everyone would be happy to have such a bath. But suddenly Kane grabbed his head and remembered that he had not thought of the drainage. The boy became despondent and everyone around him noticed that something was wrong with him. The hero apologized to everyone and asked for help to make the drain. Noel asked not to apologize so much and the Gardy also gladly decided to help them. And when they were done with their work the sun had already set and dusk was thickening. At last everything was ready and Kane was so tired that he wanted to take a bath. But it was hard for him to even go in there and this world was not so perfect. But for what it was worth, Kane was determined to take a hot bath tomorrow. He turned to everyone and asked them to also come to the bath tomorrow. Gardy was fine with this and the girl replied that they had had enough for today. The butler told Mr. Kane that it was time for them to have dinner. When the whole family sat down at the table for whatever reason, Chris and Arthur were dejected and had their heads down. It seemed incredible to Kane that the brothers could handle so much paperwork. He found it hard to believe how hard a lord's work could be. Lydia asked Arthur and Chris to gather their thoughts. She told Arthur that the amount of work today was still small and Chris that when he got a girlfriend, he would have to take the lead. Lydia didn't understand what was wrong with them and why they were so exhausted. She cited the example of Alice, who was full of energy, and Kane was surprised that she was not tired of studying. Chris was apparently on his rounds of the estate today, as he was muttering about the dozens of stores in one day without a break. Kane felt sorry for them and needed to make a bath as soon as possible. The next morning the workers came to Mr. Kane's house. Noel told the lad that they were craftsmen from the Masons Guild and the Carpenters Guild, and Kane wished them good morning. He would like the lads to make a roof, a door and a window in this bathhouse. He also needed them to fix the bathtub inside. The laborers estimated everything, and Kane asked how long it would take them to do the job. The man smiled and promised to have it done before dark, and Kane was delighted. Then the tradesmen brought the wood and plaster and they set to work. The laborers approached Kane and more than once. Each time he gave them instructions. By lunchtime the framework of the roof was ready, and it was exciting for the hero to watch it take shape. The man asked permission to ask Mr. Kane a question, and the hero thought they had found something missing or poorly installed. But it was not so, and the man replied that few skillful men could have built a room with such a solid foundation. He had to say that this bathroom was a little chilly, so he suggested the idea of a stove in the locker room and thought it would help. The hero hadn't seen one yet, and it did sound perfect. It was hard to take a bath in a cool room. Kane asked if they could install an additional furnace, and the worker replied that they would have it ready as soon as possible. Kane worried that it could be expensive, and if so, they could tell him what it looked like and he would make it. But the man smiled and said that the fee for the stove would be enough. In return, the man would want Kane to build a fence around it, and Kane used a stone wall. The man had already heard many stories about Kane, but he still kept surprising everyone. Kane then dried the plaster with magic and added chairs and the bathroom tubs themselves with magic. It was amazing to Noel that the workers could do so much at once. One of the boys smiled, saying that it was easy. Work resumed in the afternoon and the roof was finished when the sun began to set. Kane wiped the sweat from his forehead and exclaimed that everything was ready. Compared to what it was before, this building had become a veritable bathhouse. Everyone present congratulated Kane-san. Just as he thought, the earth magic was awesome. But Kane didn't understand what they were talking about, for it was all thanks to their help. Kane smiled and thanked everyone sincerely, for thanks to all of them, they had the best bathhouse. Everyone was delighted, and after work, Kane prepared for today's hike. Kane laid out towel, high-quality soap, clothes and other things needed for the bath. He also set up some lamps, using the living magic of light. And at the same time, he explained to the maids how to use the bath. Lydia went up to Kane and said that the maids had explained everything to her. It was amazing to her that he was able to build such a beautiful thing. Randolph said that it only worked out because of Kane's guidance and magic, and Lydia thought it was great. But the guy replied that it wasn't really, and it was all thanks to everyone's help. Lydia asked permission to join the bathhouse hike, and Kane was certainly fine with that. Alice cut into their conversation and exclaimed that she wanted to go there too. In that case, Lydia said that the three of them would go there. At first the hero agreed, but upon realizing her words he blushed and became embarrassed. He decided that he had misheard her and questioned her about it.